Have you ever felt like the history we're taught is only a fraction of the real story? We learn about the Egyptians with their pyramids, the Romans with their vast empire, the Greeks with their philosophy, but what about the countless societies that rose, thrived, and vanished, leaving behind only whispers and fragments? History, it turns out, is written by the survivors, and for every civilization that made it into our textbooks, there are dozens that slipped through the cracks of time, their stories waiting just beneath the surface. Imagine entire cities that once pulsed with life, cultures that developed unique traditions, languages that echoed through marketplaces, and people who loved, fought, and dreamed just as we do, only to disappear so completely that we're left piecing together their existence from scattered pottery shards, half-buried foundations, and enigmatic symbols carved into stone. These aren't just footnotes, they're lost chapters of humanity's journey, and each one has something profound to teach us about resilience, innovation, and the fragile nature of society itself. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to rediscover 30 astonishing lost civilizations you've likely never heard of, societies that flourished in hidden valleys, remote islands, and vast deserts, often with no written records to tell their tales. From mysterious seafaring cultures to advanced agricultural communities that simply vanished, we'll explore how they lived, why they fell, and what secrets they left behind. So settle in and open your mind to the forgotten worlds we're about to uncover together. You're in for some unforgettable stories. Our journey begins not in the well-trodden lands of Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley, but high along the arid coast of Peru. Here, nestled between the Pacific Ocean and the Andean foothills, the Norte Chico civilization emerged as a true pioneer. What makes them so extraordinary is their timeline. While the Great Pyramid of Giza was being constructed in Egypt, these people were already building their own monumental cities. Dating from around 3,500 to 1,800 before Common Era, they are arguably the oldest known civilization in the entire Americas, a title that alone demands our attention. Unlike other early cultures that left behind stunning artworks or complex writing systems, the Norte Chico tell their story through architecture and social organization. Their landscape was dominated by 24 major ceremonial centers, with the cities of Caral and Espero being the most prominent. Imagine approaching one of these centers. You wouldn't see fortresses or defensive walls. Instead, you'd be greeted by enormous, flat-topped pyramids made of stone and packed earth, some standing over 100 feet tall. These were not the dwellings of kings, but the heart of a society deeply connected to ritual and community. Flanking these massive structures were their most distinctive architectural features, sunken circular plazas. These weren't mere gathering places. They were carefully engineered arenas, dug deep into the ground, likely used for ceremonies that united the people under the vast Peruvian sky. The precision of their construction, with stone-filled bags called shikris used for earthquake-resistant foundations, reveals an advanced understanding of engineering that was millennia ahead of its time. The mystery of the Norte Chico only deepens when we consider what they lacked. There's no evidence they ever developed pottery, which was fundamental to almost every other contemporary culture for storage and cooking. More strikingly, we found no trace of any visual art, no statues of gods, no painted murals, no ornate jewelry. Their economy wasn't based on the typical grain agriculture we see elsewhere, but on an incredibly sophisticated and reciprocal relationship with the sea and the land. They cultivated crops like cotton and gourds in river valleys, using irrigation canals that transformed the desert into fertile ground. This cotton was then traded with coastal communities like Espero, who used it to make the fishing nets that harvested the incredibly rich Pacific waters. This symbiotic network, trading fish for cotton and other goods, created a stable economic foundation that supported large populations and allowed for the grand projects that still awe us today. So what happened to these ingenious, peaceful pioneers? Their disappearance is as quiet and enigmatic as their rise. There are no signs of invasion, no evidence of a catastrophic war. The prevailing theory points to a slowly unfolding environmental crisis. Shifts in climate patterns may have caused prolonged droughts, disrupting the delicate balance of their irrigation systems and perhaps even affecting the ocean's bounty that they so depended on. Their society, so perfectly adapted to a specific set of conditions, may have simply unraveled when those conditions changed. They didn't vanish without a trace, though. Their legacy is profound, laying the cultural and architectural groundwork for every Andean civilization that followed, from the Chavin to the mighty Inca. The Norte Chico stand as a haunting reminder that a civilization doesn't need gold or glory to be great sometimes. The most enduring mysteries are built from stone, earth, and a profound connection to the world around them. Leaving the sun-baked pyramids of Peru, we now travel across the Atlantic and forward in time to the lush, green heartland of what is now Nigeria. Here, in the region of Jos Plateau, a culture of profound artistic genius and technological innovation flourished in near-total isolation. This is the story of the Nok, a civilization that existed from around 1500 before Common Era to about 500 Common Era, and whose stunning legacy was almost completely erased by time until a single, chance discovery. The story of their rediscovery reads like something out of an adventure novel. In 1943, a tin miner was working a hillside near the village of Nok, which would later give the culture its name. His shovel struck something hard and unusual, not a precious metal or a gemstone, but a small, sculpted terracotta head. This was no crude idol. It was a work of sophisticated art, with intricate, detailed features and a striking, almost lifelike presence. This one small find would open the archaeological floodgates, leading to the unearthing of hundreds of similar figures. The Nok, it turned out, were master artists who created some of the earliest and most sophisticated figurative sculptures ever found in all of sub-Saharan Africa. These terracotta sculptures are breathtaking in their variety and expression. They depict men and women with elaborate, intricate hairstyles, adorned with beaded jewelry and holding various objects. Some figures sit in contemplative poses, while others appear to be warriors or rulers. The most captivating feature is often the eyes triangular or circular in shape, with piercing perforations that give the faces an intense, soulful gaze that seems to look right through the centuries. But these weren't merely decorative pieces or royal portraits. Scholars believe they held deep spiritual significance, likely used in funerary rituals to honor ancestors or perhaps represent deities, serving as a powerful link between the physical world and the realm of the spirits. The technical skill required to create these large, hollow-fired clay figures without them cracking is a testament to a highly specialized and advanced artistic tradition. Yet, the Nok were far more than just artists. Their other great achievement lay in the realm of technology. They were among the very first people in West Africa to master the incredibly complex process of iron smelting. Evidence from sites like Taruga reveals sophisticated ironworking furnaces that could reach temperatures high enough to extract pure metal from ore. This wasn't just a technological novelty, it was a revolution. The production of iron tools would have transformed every aspect of life's superior axes for clearing dense forests and farming, stronger spears and arrowheads for hunting and defense, and more efficient blades for crafting and building. This mastery of iron likely provided the economic and military foundation that allowed Nok society to become so widespread and influential, their culture radiating across a vast area of central Nigeria for nearly 2,000 years. And then they were gone. The mystery of their disappearance is as profound as their art. Around 500 Common Era, the production of their distinctive terracotta sculptures ceases entirely. The sophisticated iron furnaces grow cold. There is no evidence of a massive invasion or a single, catastrophic event. The leading theories point to a slower, more insidious collapse. One compelling idea is that their immense success may have sown the seeds of their downfall. Their growing population and advanced iron tools would have led to intensive deforestation to fuel their smelting furnaces and create farmland. This could have triggered severe environmental degradation and soil erosion, making it impossible to sustain their agricultural base. Alternatively, a major shift in climate patterns could have brought prolonged drought, crippling their ability to grow food. Their society, so brilliantly adapted to its environment, may have simply withered away when that environment could no longer support it. The Nok vanished, leaving their magnificent sculptures buried in the earth, silent monuments to a brilliant and enigmatic culture, whose influence would echo in the later artistic traditions of West Africa for centuries to come. Now, we voyage from the African continent to the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, to a land so revered it was celebrated in myth as a pure and sacred paradise. This is the story of Dilmun, a civilization that transformed barren islands into a thriving nexus of Bronze Age commerce and culture. For the ancient Sumerians, Dilmun was more than a real place. It was a divine realm, a garden of the gods where sickness and death held no power, a land of eternal freshness and sweet, life-giving water. This mythological status hints at the very real awe and importance this civilization held for its contemporaries. Centered on the islands of modern-day Bahrain, with influence stretching into the eastern Arabian Peninsula, Dilmun's true power was not built on military conquest, but on its unparalleled strategic location. Imagine a world where the mighty empires of Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, craved the luxury goods of the distant Indus Valley civilization, in modern Pakistan and India. Copper, ivory, exotic woods, and precious stones needed to travel thousands of miles, and the most perilous part of that journey was the sea. Dilmun's great innovation was becoming the indispensable middleman. Their sturdy, well-crewed ships navigated the Gulf's treacherous waters, collecting goods from the Indus Valley traders and transporting them safely to the Mesopotamian ports like Ur. In return, they brought back wool, leather, and olive oil. They didn't just transport goods, they created and managed the entire economic network, becoming fabulously wealthy in the process by controlling the markup on every single traded item. This wealth did not simply vanish into royal coffers. It left a staggering mark on the landscape that is still visible today. The most enduring legacy of the Dilmun civilization is its city of the dead. Outside their capital, a vast expanse of land is covered by tens of thousands of burial mounds, creating one of the largest prehistoric cemeteries on Earth. These aren't just simple piles of rock, they are elaborate, engineered tombs. The earliest were simple mounds, but they evolved into complex, chambered graves for the elite, often featuring multiple rooms and corridors built from finely cut limestone. The presence of such a massive burial ground points to a large, stable, and prosperous population that practiced intricate funerary rites for centuries, believing in a rich afterlife worthy of such grand preparation. So what could cause the fall of such a vital, well-connected, and wealthy society? The decline of Dilmun around 600 before Common Era wasn't sudden, but a slow fading brought on by a shifting world. The primary theory points to the collapse of their economic raison d'etre. The great Indus Valley civilization, their primary trading partner to the east, had already vanished centuries earlier. Then, new maritime technologies and routes emerged. The Phoenicians and others began to pioneer direct sea routes across the open ocean, bypassing the Persian Gulf and its traditional middlemen entirely. Dilmun's carefully controlled monopoly was rendered obsolete. Compounding this economic blow, environmental changes likely played a role. A shift towards more arid conditions could have strained their ancient, sophisticated freshwater springs and agricultural systems. The paradise described in the myths, dependent on sweet water and abundance, may have simply dried up. The Dilmunites didn't disappear overnight. Their culture slowly receded, their great trade hub quieted, and their islands were eventually absorbed into other empires. But their memory endures, not just in the endless fields of tombs, but as a testament to the fact that in the ancient world, the control of knowledge and trade routes could build a civilization as powerful as any won by the sword. Yet another remarkable chapter in Mesopotamia's complex history unfolds not with a single empire, but with two vastly different neighbors whose fates were deeply intertwined with the rise and fall of the region's great powers. We turn now to the rugged highlands of southwestern Iran, home to the resilient and sophisticated Elamites, and then to the enigmatic Gutians from the northern mountains, a people so mysterious they are remembered more as a force of nature than a civilization. The Elamite civilization stands as one of the most enduring and influential cultures of the ancient Near East, with a history stretching back to around 2700 before Common Era and lasting for over 2 millennia. What set them apart from the very beginning was their fierce independence. While the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians rose and fell in the Mesopotamian plains, the Elamites carved out a powerful kingdom in the difficult terrain of the Zagros Mountains, with their magnificent capital at Susa becoming a glittering center of culture and power. Their longevity was no accident. It was a testament to their incredible adaptability and political shrewdness. They were never permanently subdued by their neighbors. Instead, they mastered the art of playing rival empires against each other, sometimes being conquered, but more often acting as conquerors themselves, or forming strategic alliances that allowed them to retain their unique identity. They were the constant, formidable rival on the eastern flank of Mesopotamia. A thorn in the side of every would-be hegemon from Sargon of Akkad to Hammurabi of Babylon. Culturally, the Elamites were true innovators. They developed their own unique writing system, known as Elamite cuneiform, which was distinct from the Akkadian or Sumerian scripts used by their neighbors. This wasn't just a simple adaptation. It recorded a language that is still considered a linguistic isolate, unrelated to any other known language family, making it one of the great undeciphered puzzles of the ancient world. Their artistic and architectural achievements were equally profound. The ziggurat at Chaga Zanbil, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is one of the best preserved such structures in existence, a massive, stepped temple complex that reached toward the heavens, demonstrating a mastery of engineering and a deep, complex religious tradition. They were also brilliant metalworkers and artisans, producing exquisite jewelry, weapons, and sculptures that blended Mesopotamian influences with their own distinctive artistic vision. The end of Elamite power, however, was tragically final. After centuries of resisting Assyrian expansion, they faced the full, unimaginable wrath of Ashurbanipal in the 7th century before Common Era. The Assyrian king, in a brutal campaign, boasts of having completely destroyed Susa, sowing the land with salt and desecrating the tombs of their ancient kings. This was more than a military defeat. It was a deliberate attempt at cultural annihilation. While a faint Elamite identity persisted under the subsequent Persian Empire, which actually adopted much of their administrative system and used Susa as a capital, their unique language and culture gradually faded into history, their legacy absorbed by their conquerors. In stark contrast to the long, documented history of the Elamites stands the Gutians, a people who exploded onto the scene with devastating force and then vanished just as quickly, leaving behind little more than a reputation for chaos. Around 2150 before Common Era, the mighty Akkadian Empire, founded by Sargon the Great, was stretching itself thin. Its core was weakening, and from the remote Zagros Mountains to the north, a new threat emerged: the Gutians. Ancient Mesopotamian sources describe them not as a civilized nation, but as a barbaric horde, a dragon with teeth of a serpent that swept down and delivered the death blow to the already crumbling Akkadian state. For a brief period, perhaps less than a century, they held sway over parts of Mesopotamia. The historical record for the Gutians is almost entirely written by their enemies, who portrayed them as cruel and incompetent rulers who brought nothing but suffering and a return to a dark age. The Sumerian king list, an ancient document, famously laments that under them, who was king, who was not king, suggesting a period of utter political fragmentation and lawlessness. The truth is likely far more complex. They probably were a collection of different tribal groups from the mountains, more accustomed to a pastoral way of life than governing a vast, sophisticated empire. Their reign was short, and they were eventually driven out by the heroes of the Sumerian revival, the kings of Uruk and Ur. The greatest mystery of the Gutians is their near-total archaeological invisibility. We have no artifacts that can be definitively labeled as Gutian, no distinctive pottery, no inscriptions in their own language, no ruins of their cities. They are a civilization known almost exclusively from the accounts of those who hated and feared them. It's possible they were simply a confederation of highland tribes who never built major cities or produced their own material culture, leaving their brief period of dominance as little more than a destructive interlude in Mesopotamian history. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that history is not always written by the winners, but sometimes by those who come after, eager to define a period of turmoil as a barbaric nightmare from which they heroically awoke. Together, the Elamites and the Gutians represent the two sides of Mesopotamia's interaction with its neighbors. one a long, complex dance of rivalry and cultural exchange, the other a sudden, violent storm that passed almost without a physical trace. But to truly grasp their genius, we must look beyond the palace walls and into the very infrastructure of their society, starting with something remarkably modern, their plumbing. The Minoans possessed an understanding of water management that would not be rivaled in Europe for over 1,000 years. In Knossos, archaeologists uncovered a sophisticated system that feels almost anachronistic. They built terracotta pipes that were finely tapered to increase water pressure and prevent clogging, connecting to a network of stone-lined drains that ran beneath the palace floors. Most astonishingly, they invented the world's first known flush toilets. These were elaborate stone seats with wooden covers, positioned above these drainage channels. A conduit of running water from a nearby container would be poured down to flush waste away through the complex subterranean sewers. This wasn't a crude novelty. It was a system designed for sanitation and comfort, reflecting a society deeply concerned with public health and urban living, a stark contrast to the world that would follow them. This mastery of their environment translated directly into their art, which bursts with a vibrancy and energy unlike anything else in the ancient world. The walls of their palaces were not mere stone. They were canvases alive with movement and color. Elaborate frescoes depicted a world of grace and power, from elegant court ladies in flounced dresses to dolphins dancing through cerulean seas. But one motif stands out above all others for its danger and dynamism: the bull-leaping ceremony. These breathtaking paintings show young acrobats, both male and female, performing what appears to be an incredibly dangerous gymnastic ritual. One athlete would grasp the charging bull's horns, using the animal's own thrust to somersault over its back into the arms of a catcher, waiting behind. This wasn't a savage blood sport. It was a highly stylized performance, likely a central religious rite that combined athleticism, courage, and a deep, symbolic connection to the potent power of the bull. The art captures a fleeting moment of perfect balance between human agility and raw animal force, a testament to a culture that celebrated grace under pressure. Yet, for all we can see and appreciate, the Minoans hold onto one secret tighter than any other: their language. We have two of their scripts. The earlier, called Cretan hieroglyphic, remains largely undeciphered. The later, Linear A, was used for administrative records and has been found on clay tablets across the island. While we can recognize the numerical and measurement systems, the language itself, the words, and the grammar defies all attempts at translation, isolating their thoughts and stories from us forever. This mystery is perfectly encapsulated in a single, mesmerizing object: the Phaistos disc. Discovered in the Palace of Phaistos, this fired clay disc, dating to around 1700 before Common Era, is covered on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols. Flowers, birds, human figures, and ships' 45 distinct signs in total are arranged in clear groups that seem to represent words or phrases. It is the world's oldest known example of movable type printing, each symbol pressed into the clay with a separate seal. But without any other examples or a Rosetta Stone to provide a key, the disc remains a silent oracle. Is it a hymn, a narrative, a legal document, or a board game? We simply do not know. It is a haunting reminder that for all our discoveries, the voices of the Minoans are still just whispers on the wind. Their sudden and catastrophic collapse around 1450 before Common Era, likely triggered by the colossal volcanic eruption on Thura and subsequent invasion by the Mycenaeans, marked the end of their unique world. But their legacy was far from lost. The Mycenaean Greeks who took over Knossos adopted the Minoan Linear, a script, adapting it to write their own language in what we call Linear B, providing the first written evidence of the Greek language. Their artistic motifs, architectural principles, and even their maritime prowess seeped into the cultural DNA of the mainland Greeks, becoming a foundational layer of the mythology that would later inspire the classical world. The Minoans, in their brilliance and their mystery, became the original source for Plato's tale of Atlantis, a magnificent, advanced island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night, a powerful echo of a very real catastrophe that erased one of history's most fascinating cultures. What truly sets the Indus Valley civilization apart, and continues to baffle archaeologists today, is the sheer modernity of their urban design. Stepping into one of their cities like Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa would have been an experience unlike any other in the ancient world. Unlike the winding, organically grown alleyways of Mesopotamian cities or the ceremonial-centric layouts of Egypt, these were meticulously planned metropolises built on a strict grid pattern. The main streets, some as wide as 30 feet, ran straight north-south and east-west, dividing the city into large superblocks. These were then subdivided by smaller lanes into individual neighborhoods, creating an orderly and efficient layout that prioritized movement and access. This wasn't a design that evolved over centuries. It was a master plan executed with remarkable precision from the very beginning, suggesting a powerful, shared vision of what a city should be. This vision extended to the very bricks they built with. One of the most telling signs of their incredible organization is the standardization of their construction materials. Throughout the entire vast expanse of the civilization, from the shores of the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas, they used fired bricks of a consistent, perfect ratio. The standard brick size was 1 to 2 to 4 in its dimensions, a proportion that made them incredibly strong and easy to stack in alternating courses for stability. This uniformity is astounding. It implies the existence of a central authority that could impose and maintain such strict building codes across thousands of square miles, or at the very least, a deeply ingrained cultural consensus on how to build. It speaks to a society that valued order, efficiency, and a remarkably high quality of life for its citizens. That quality of life is most evident in what is arguably their greatest engineering achievement, a sophisticated and comprehensive public sanitation system that was millennia ahead of its time. Every single house, from the largest courtyard mansion to the smallest two-room dwelling, was connected to this citywide network. Each home had its own bathing area with a sloped, watertight floor and a dedicated drain. Wastewater from these baths and from indoor latrines was channeled through underground clay pipes into the main sewer lines that ran beneath the city's streets. These sewers were massive, brick-lined tunnels large enough for a person to walk through, designed for regular maintenance and cleaning. At regular intervals, covered manholes provided access points, showing this was a system built to last and to be managed. This wasn't a luxury for the elite. It was a universal civic utility, a radical investment in public health that likely drastically reduced disease and set a standard for urban living that would not be seen again until the Roman Empire, and not matched until the 19th century. Their mastery of water didn't stop at waste removal. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro stands as a monumental example of their hydraulic engineering. This large, waterproofed pool, surrounded by a colonnade and rooms, was likely used for ritual purification ceremonies. It was fed by water from a large well, with a corbelled arch drain to efficiently empty it. The city was also dotted with hundreds of wells, providing fresh, clean water to every neighborhood, and ensuring that the daily needs of the population were met without having to travel to a distant river. This intricate dance of bringing fresh water in and efficiently taking wastewater out reveals a society that had an almost obsessive concern with cleanliness, order, and the management of its environment on a grand scale. All of this breathtaking coordination inevitably leads to one of the great unresolved debates in archaeology. How were they governed? The conspicuous absence of obvious palaces, grandiose royal tombs, or monumental statues of warrior kings, the standard trappings of power everywhere else in the ancient world, leaves a vacuum where we expect to find a ruler. This has led many scholars to propose a fascinating theory, that the Indus Valley civilization might have been a collection of largely independent city-states, governed not by a single all-powerful king, but by a council of elites, perhaps merchants, priests, or elders. In this model, their astonishing uniformity wouldn't be the result of imperial decree from a single capital, but rather a shared cultural and ideological framework, a common set of beliefs and practices that every city adhered to willingly. The focus on public works over palaces could suggest a more collective, perhaps even oligarchic or proto-democratic, form of administration. On the other side of the debate, other experts argue that this level of standardization over such a vast area simply must indicate a strong, centralized state. They point to the evidence of long-distance trade, the coordinated defense of cities with massive, uniform fortifications, and the existence of large, central granaries that could have been used for taxing and redistributing grain. The rulers, in this view, may have been so secure in their power that they didn't need to boast about it with giant statues. Their authority was expressed through the flawless functioning of the city itself. The grid pattern of the streets, the universal brick size, the ubiquitous sanitation, these were the monuments to their power. A more subtle but infinitely more effective form of control that prioritized the health and order of the state over the glorification of a single individual. Without any deciphered written records to settle the argument, the true nature of their governance remains one of their most profound and compelling mysteries, a silent testament to a society that defies our easy categorizations. Journeying now from the orderly streets of the Indus Valley, we cross the globe and venture into the steamy lowlands of the Gulf of Mexico, where the air is thick with humidity and the landscape is dominated by volcanoes. Here, in the fertile lands of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco, Mexico, the Olmec civilization laid the foundational stones for all of Mesoamerican culture. Flourishing from around 1500 to 400 before Common Era, they are rightly celebrated as the region's mother culture, a title earned not through fleeting dominance, but through a legacy of innovations so profound that they would echo for millennia in the traditions of the Maya, the Zapotec, and the Aztec. The most iconic and visceral symbols of Olmec power are without question the colossal stone heads, carved from single, gigantic blocks of basalt, hauled from distant volcanic mountains. These monumental sculptures are as awe-inspiring today as they were over 3,000 years ago. Weighing up to 50 tons each and standing nearly 10 feet tall, they depict helmeted men with broad, flat noses, thick lips, and stern, commanding expressions. The sheer logistical feat of their creation is staggering. Without the wheel, without draft animals, Olmec engineers would have had to transport these monoliths over 50 miles through swamps and rivers, likely using a combination of roller logs and immense rafts. Each head is unique, believed to be a portrait of a powerful individual ruler, perhaps a king or a chieftain. They are not merely art, they are permanent declarations of authority, meant to project an aura of unchallengeable power to all who saw them, an enduring stone reminder of the dynasty that commanded such immense resources and labor. Yet to define the Olmecs solely by their sculptures would be a great disservice to their intellectual genius. Their most significant contribution, one that fundamentally altered the course of history in the Americas, was the invention of writing. For a long time, the Maya were credited with this achievement, but a discovery at the Olmec site of Cascajal revealed a serpentine block etched with 62 distinct glyphs. This Cascajal block, dating to around 900 before Common Era, represents the earliest evidence of a true writing system in the entire Western Hemisphere. The symbols include insects, eyes, thrones, and corn plants, arranged in horizontal rows, clearly following a syntax that suggests a spoken language. This was not simple picture writing, it was a complex script capable of recording history, rituals, and the nuances of human speech. This single artifact shatters old assumptions and places the Olmec at the very heart of intellectual innovation, proving they were the first in a long line of Mesoamerican peoples to seek to make language permanent. Their intellectual landscape was equally rich in spiritual and cosmological thought. They were avid astronomers, tracking the movements of celestial bodies and developing a sophisticated calendar system that would later be refined by the Maya. Their religious beliefs centered on a pantheon of deities, many of which featured a distinctive combination of human and jaguar-like features, giving rise to the powerful word jaguar concept that symbolized a potent mix of human intelligence and raw animal force. This spiritual world was made tangible in their ceremonial centers, like the great city of San Lorenzo Tenochtitlan. Built on a massive, artificially leveled plateau, San Lorenzo was a landscape of power, featuring not only the colossal heads, but also intricate aqueducts made of basalt troughs and hidden ritual caches where they buried precious offerings of carved jade and serpentine, often deliberately breaking them as part of a sacred act. For all their grandeur and innovation, the Olmec civilization experienced a profound and mysterious decline around 400 before Common Era. Their great centers were systematically and ritually defaced. Monuments were toppled, and the colossal heads were buried in long, straight lines, as if carefully laid to rest. There is no evidence of a foreign invasion, pointing instead to an internal unraveling. The leading theory suggests environmental pressures played a critical role. Volcanic activity in the region may have altered river courses that were essential for transportation and agriculture. Alternatively, the Olmec themselves may have contributed to their own downfall through intensive land use, leading to soil depletion and erosion that crippled their agricultural base. It is also possible that the immense social effort required to sustain their rulers' grandiose projects created untenable class tensions, leading to rebellion and the conscious rejection of the very power structures that built the cities. They did not vanish without a trace. Their cultural DNA, their writing, their calendar, their ball game, their reverence for jade, and their complex deities was inherited and reinvented by every sophisticated culture that followed. The Olmecs became the silent, foundational layer of Mesoamerican civilization, their story written not in libraries, but in the cultural codes of the empires that rose long after their cities were reclaimed by the jungle. But to find a civilization that did not just rival ancient Egypt, but actually conquered and ruled it, we must travel south, up the Nile River into the land of Nubia, in what is now Sudan. Here, the kingdom of Kush emerged not as a mere neighbor or trading partner to the pharaohs, but as a formidable power in its own right, one that would eventually command the throne of Egypt itself. For centuries, the relationship between Egypt and Kush was one of complex interplay trade, cultural exchange, and frequent military conflict, with Egypt often dominating and extracting the immense wealth of Nubia's gold mines. But the balance of power would not remain static forever. The pinnacle of Kushite ambition and power arrived in the 8th century before Common Era, a period of disarray and fragmentation in Egypt known as the Third Intermediate Period. With the Nile Delta ruled by competing chieftains and the pharaoh's authority, a shadow of its former self, a powerful Kushite king named Pi saw his opportunity. Launching a military campaign from his capital at Napata, near the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkal, Pi marched north with a formidable army. He did not see this as an invasion by a foreigner, but as a righteous campaign to reunite the two lands of Egypt, to restore the cosmic order which the squabbling petty rulers had disrupted. His victory was comprehensive. One by one, the Delta cities fell, and Pi documented his triumph on a magnificent stela, portraying himself not as a conqueror but as the true, pious pharaoh, honored by the gods of Egypt. His successors, most notably Tiharka, would solidify this rule, establishing the 25th dynasty of Egypt, a line of pharaohs who were, unequivocally, from Kush. These black pharaohs from the south did not seek to destroy Egyptian culture. They became its most passionate devotees and restorers. They embarked on massive building projects throughout Egypt and Nubia, reviving artistic styles and religious traditions that had languished for centuries. They constructed temples and erected statues in the classic Egyptian manner, though with one telling distinction. Their portraits always featured their distinct Kushite features: rounded faces, strong cheekbones, and a unique headdress adorned with a double uraeus, the cobra symbol denoting their rule over both Kush and Egypt. Their reign was a renaissance for a declining Egypt, a final, brilliant flowering of ancient pharaonic culture, but it was all too brief. The rising power of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, with its advanced iron weaponry, eventually proved too much to resist. Despite a valiant defense by Tiharka, the Assyrians pushed the Kushite pharaohs out of Egypt and back to their Nubian homeland. This retreat, however, was not the end of the kingdom of Kush. It was a rebirth. Forced to focus on their core territory, the Kushites entered a new golden age, now centered farther south at the city of Meria. This new capital became the engine of a transformed and incredibly sophisticated civilization. The most visible sign of their enduring power and wealth is a sight that still stuns visitors today: the pyramids of Meria. While the Egyptian pyramids are vastly larger and older, the Nubians built them in far greater numbers. Over 200 of these steep-sided, elegant structures stand in clusters across the deserts of Sudan, marking the tombs of Kushite kings, queens, and elites. They are more numerous than all the pyramids of Egypt combined, creating a breathtaking funerary landscape that is one of archaeology's most magnificent sights. The shift to Meria also heralded an economic revolution, one built on fire and ore. The area around the city was rich in iron ore and blessed with vast forests, providing both the raw material and the fuel for industry. The Kushites became masters of iron production on an industrial scale. The slag heaps around Meria are so massive they look like small black mountains, testifying to centuries of intense smelting activity. They produced not just weapons, but also sophisticated tools, plows for farming, chisels for building, and axes for clearing land, which would have dramatically increased their agricultural and economic power. This prowess in metallurgy made Meria a renowned industrial hub, a Birmingham of the ancient world, and its reputation as a great iron producer was even recorded by the Roman author Pliny the Elder centuries later. Culturally, Meria developed a unique identity that increasingly distanced itself from the Egyptian model that had so influenced Napata. They began to worship their own distinct deities, like the lion-headed god Apedemak, a powerful warrior god. Most significantly, they developed their own writing system. The Meroitic script, one of the oldest in Africa, is a beautiful and elegant alphabetic script, but one that remains only partially deciphered today. We can sound out the words on the countless stelae and temple walls, but their meaning remains just out of reach, a silent language guarding the intimate thoughts and history of its people. This cultural confidence is also reflected in the role of women. The Kushites had a long tradition of powerful queen mothers, known as Kandaks, who held significant secular and religious authority. Several of these women are recorded as ruling in their own right, leading armies, and negotiating with foreign powers, a level of female political power that was exceptionally rare in the ancient world. The decline of this resilient and innovative kingdom was not the result of a single war, but a slow death by 1,000 cuts. Their massive iron industry, the very source of their wealth, likely contributed to their downfall through widespread deforestation, stripping the land of the timber needed to fuel their furnaces and leading to environmental degradation. As their power waned, their lucrative trade routes were increasingly threatened, and then captured by the rising power of the Ethiopian kingdom of Axum to the east. By the 4th century Common Era, a weakened Meria was finally sacked by the Axumites, bringing a definitive end to one of Africa's greatest and most enduring indigenous civilizations. The Kingdom of Kush stands as a monumental testament to the fact that African history is far more than the story of Egypt. It is a rich tapestry of powerful empires that rose, competed, and created a legacy of stunning pyramids and industrial innovation deep in the heart of the continent. Now we must travel to the rugged highlands of ancient Anatolia, a land bridge between continents that became a cradle for cultures whose influence far outweighed their fame. Here, long before the mighty Hittites forged their empire, the mysterious Hattians built the foundational layer of Anatolian civilization. From as early as 2500 before Common Era, these indigenous people inhabited the heartland of what is now Turkey, with their cultural and likely political center at the city of Hadusa, a site that would later be adopted and made glorious by their Hittite successors. The Hattians were a people deeply connected to the land, and their worldview was reflected in a rich and complex spiritual life. They worshipped a diverse pantheon of deities, many of which were intimately tied to the forces of nature and the elements. Their primary gods were often associated with mountains, storms, and the underworld, reflecting the dramatic and sometimes harsh Anatolian landscape they called home. This wasn't a distant, celestial religion. It was an earthy, visceral belief system where rituals were performed in open-air sanctuaries on mountain peaks and in sacred stone chambers. The art they left behind offers a haunting window into their unique aesthetic. Unlike the idealized figures of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Hattian art has a distinctive, almost abstract quality. They crafted magnificent idols from precious metals and stone statuettes of standing figures with hands clasped in reverence, often with oversized, inquisitive eyes and simplified, geometric bodies. They also produced stunning ceremonial standards, such as bronze statues of stags and bulls, which were likely carried in religious processions. These objects weren't merely decorative, they were powerful ritual objects, designed to bridge the gap between the human world and the divine. Their most enduring legacy, however, was not in objects but in ideas. The Hittites, who would eventually conquer and absorb the Hattians, did not simply erase their culture. Instead, they adopted vast swaths of Hattian religious practice, incorporating their deities, myths, and rituals into their own state religion. The very name of the Hittite capital, Hattusa, and their own term for their land, Hatti, were direct acknowledgments of the people who were there first. The Hattians became the cultural and spiritual substratum upon which a great empire was built, their voice echoing silently through the liturgies of their conquerors. To the southeast of the Hattian lands, another influential culture was rising to power, the Hurrians. While the Hattians were a foundational influence, the Hurrians became a major international power player. They were a widespread people, their communities scattered across northern Mesopotamia and southeastern Anatolia. But they reached their political zenith with the establishment of the Mitanni Empire around 1500 before Common Era. The Mitanni Kingdom became a formidable force, one of the great powers of the late Bronze Age alongside Egypt, Babylonia, and the Hittites, controlling a vast territory through a network of vassal states. Their power was so significant that they engaged in diplomacy and war with pharaohs, even forging a famous peace treaty with Egypt that was sealed by the marriage of several Mitanni princesses into the Egyptian royal household. The source of the Mitanni's military might, and their most celebrated contribution to ancient warfare, was their mastery of the chariot. They perfected the light, fast, two-horse war chariot into a devastatingly effective platform for archers. What made their chariotry truly elite, however, was their revolutionary horse training techniques. A fascinating Hittite text, written by a Mitanni horse trainer named Kikilai, survives to detail their methods. This wasn't a simple manual. It was a complex, rigorous program that involved meticulous conditioning, diet control, and a carefully orchestrated training schedule that lasted for over 180 days. Kikilai's text reveals an almost scientific understanding of equine physiology, describing how to build the animal's endurance and strength through exercises in rivers and over long distances. This expertise gave the Mitanni a decisive advantage on the battlefield, and their techniques were so admired that they were adopted by their rivals, including the Hittites and the Egyptians, fundamentally changing the nature of warfare in the ancient world. Beyond their military prowess, the Hurrians were also remarkable cultural innovators. Their language, Hurrian, is a linguistic isolate, unrelated to the Semitic or Indo-European languages that surrounded it, making it another intriguing puzzle for modern scholars. They left behind a rich literary tradition, including the magnificent Hurrian hymns, which are the oldest surviving substantially complete notated pieces of music in the world. These hymns, inscribed on clay tablets in the ancient city of Ugarit, include detailed instructions for a singer accompanied by a 9-stringed samum, a type of lyre, providing a precious glimpse into the sound of the ancient world. Culturally, they exerted a profound influence on their neighbors, particularly the Hittites, who translated Hurrian myths, adopted their gods, such as the powerful storm god Teshub, and incorporated their legal and social customs. The fates of both the Hattians and the Hurrians were ultimately decided by the shifting tides of imperial power. The Hattians, as a distinct cultural entity, faded from view as they were gradually absorbed into the expanding Hittite Empire around 1700 before Common Era. Rather than being eradicated, their culture was assimilated, their traditions living on within the practices of their conquerors. The Hurrian-speaking Mitanni Empire, however, met a more decisive end. Caught in a vice between the rising ambitions of the Hittites to the west and the Assyrians to the east, their empire crumbled under the military pressure. The Assyrians, in particular, delivered the final blow, sacking their capital and absorbing their territory into their own growing empire by around 1350 before Common Era. Both civilizations demonstrate that a legacy is not always measured by the duration of an empire, but by the enduring cultural DNA it implants in the world. The Hattians provided the spiritual bedrock for the Hittites, while the Hurrians gifted the ancient world unparalleled military technology and a rich cultural tapestry, their contributions silently woven into the history of greater powers that followed. Now we venture north, to the arid river valleys of Peru's coast, where another civilization mastered their harsh environment with breathtaking artistry and engineering. The Mach culture, flourishing from around 100 to 700 Common Era, created a world of startling realism and divine power, a society whose dramatic end seems to have been written in the very weather patterns that once sustained it. The Mach were not a single, centralized empire in the classic sense, but rather a network of culturally linked communities spread across several river valleys, each with its own ruling elite. What bound them together was a shared religion, a common artistic vision, and an incredible aptitude for hydraulic engineering. In a land where rain almost never falls, their survival depended on capturing every drop of water that flowed from the Andes Mountains during the brief seasonal surges. They became masters of this desert, constructing an extensive network of canals that diverted river water to irrigate vast fields of corn, beans, squash, and peanuts. This agricultural surplus allowed them to support a complex society with a clear social hierarchy, specialized artisans, and powerful priest-kings who could command the labor to build some of the largest structures ever erected in the ancient Americas. The most visible testament to that power are their monumental adobe brick pyramids, known as huacas. The twin structures of Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna dominate the landscape at the site of Mach. The Huaca del Sol, the larger of the two, was a truly colossal undertaking. It is estimated to have been built from over 140 million adobe bricks, many of them bearing distinctive marks that may have signified the particular community or clan that contributed its labor to this vast communal project. This was more than a temple. It was a physical manifestation of social order and religious devotion. Across the plaza, the Huaca de la Luna, while smaller, is in many ways more revealing. Its walls were not mere earthen mounds, but were brilliantly painted with elaborate murals depicting their formidable deities, including the recurring decapitator god, a fanged anthropomorphic figure often shown holding a ritual knife. Most strikingly, archaeologists have discovered evidence that this was a site of intense ritual activity, including probable human sacrifice, suggesting a religion that sought to maintain cosmic balance through the ultimate offering. But if their architecture speaks of collective power, their art offers an astonishingly intimate glimpse into individual lives. The Mach are perhaps best known for their hyper-realistic ceramic portrait vessels. These are not generic faces or stylized gods. They are believed to be actual portraits of specific people. Each one is unique, capturing an incredible range of human expression: a nobleman with a serene, confident gaze, a warrior with a broken nose and a battle-weary frown, an old woman with a face etched by time and laughter, even individuals with diseases or physical deformities. These vessels were mold-made, but the facial features were often hand-modeled, giving each one a distinct personality. They are so precise that some scholars have proposed they might represent a form of historical record, perhaps depicting revered ancestors, vanquished enemies, or key members of the elite. This unparalleled tradition of portraiture gives us a profound connection to the Mach people, allowing us to look directly into the faces of individuals who lived and died nearly 2,000 years ago. Their mastery extended from clay into metal. Mach metallurgists were among the most advanced in the pre-Columbian world, working with gold, silver, and copper to create objects of breathtaking beauty and technical sophistication. They developed complex techniques like soldering, welding, and electroplating to gild objects with a thin layer of gold. They crafted intricate nose ornaments, ear spools, headdresses, and ceremonial knives known as tumis, all adorned with intricate imagery from their spiritual world. For the Mach, these metals were not merely wealth. They were sacred materials, with gold representing the sun and the divine, and silver symbolizing the moon and the sea. Their artwork, whether in metal or clay, often depicted a rich and complex narrative world: ceremonial battles, elaborate hunts, mythological scenes, and intimate sexual acts, providing a vivid, if still partially understood, window into their beliefs and daily rituals. This vibrant, sophisticated world did not slowly fade away. It appears to have experienced a precipitous and catastrophic collapse around the middle of the 7th century Common Era. The archaeological record tells a grim story. At Huaca de la Luna, A final layer of mud brick construction was left unfinished. Great halls were abandoned, and elite burials ceased. The evidence points squarely at a series of devastating environmental crises, almost certainly triggered by extreme El Niño events. These periodic climatic disturbances would have reversed the very conditions the Mach had so expertly engineered to survive. Instead of the steady, manageable river flow they depended on, an El Niño would have brought torrential rains to the desert, causing catastrophic flooding that would have obliterated their intricate canal systems and buried their fields under meters of silt and debris. This would have been followed by a prolonged, crippling drought, as the usual weather patterns failed to return. The Mach's entire society, built over centuries of perfect adaptation to a specific environment, was utterly vulnerable to its violent swings. We can only imagine the social and spiritual chaos that followed. The priest kings, whose power was based on their perceived ability to intercede with the gods and ensure agricultural abundance, would have seen their authority completely undermined. Famine, disease, and social unrest would have torn the culture apart from within. It is likely that the population fractured, with groups migrating away from the devastated valleys in search of sustenance, ending the unified cultural and artistic traditions that defined the Mach Golden Age. Their story is a powerful and haunting reminder of the fragility of even the most brilliant civilizations when faced with the unpredictable fury of the natural world. They left behind no written records, but their art endures, a gallery of silent, stoic faces forever bearing witness to a lost world of power, faith, and resilience. While their military might was secured by elite warriors, the true soul of Silla society was expressed in a different material, gold. The Silla royalty and aristocracy did not merely wear gold. They seemed to embody it, crafting some of the most breathtaking and spiritually resonant regalia the ancient world has ever produced. The crowns discovered in the lavish burial mounds of Gyeongju are not just symbols of wealth. They are intricate masterpieces of art and profound religious statements. Forged from pure sheet gold, these crowns are astonishingly delicate yet incredibly complex. Their most distinctive feature is the array of upright, branching forms that look like trees or antlers, often festooned with clusters of tiny, dangling gold discs and leaves that would have shimmered and tinkled with every movement of the wearer's head. This was a conscious representation of the sacred world tree, a central element in Siberian shamanistic beliefs that the Silla people incorporated into their own spiritual practices. The tree connected the earthly realm to the heavens, and by wearing it, the king became the living axis of the universe, the divine conduit between his people and the gods. But the brilliance of these crowns is magnified by the dazzling inlays of precious materials that adorn them. The Silla artisans were masterful in their use of color and contrast. They meticulously set hundreds of comma-shaped pieces of green jade, known as gagak, into the goldwork. They also used brilliant blue glass and deep red garnets, creating a vibrant, polychrome effect that must have been absolutely mesmerizing in the sunlight. These weren't just aesthetic choices. Each material held deep symbolic meaning. The jade was believed to possess spiritual power and promote longevity, while the gold itself represented the sun, immortality, and the absolute power of the monarch. This exquisite craftsmanship extended beyond crowns to all forms of personal adornment. Heavy belts made of dozens of intricate gold plaques, graceful earrings that dangled to the shoulders, elaborate necklaces, and even golden shoes. Every piece was designed to project an aura of otherworldly, divinely sanctioned authority, transforming the elite into walking deities. This obsession with hierarchy and status was not merely for show. It was codified into the very bones of Silla society through one of history's most rigid and elaborate class systems, the bone rank system, or Galpum. Your place in this structure was determined entirely by your birth, specifically by the purity of your aristocratic bloodline. At the very apex were the Siangul, or sacred bone royals, who possessed the purest royal blood and were the only individuals eligible to become king. Just below them were the Jingul, the true bone aristocracy, who filled the highest government and military posts. The ranks continued downward through 6 distinct tiers, each with its own set of privileges and severe restrictions. This system governed every single aspect of a person's life. It dictated the size and style of the house you could live in, the color and material of the clothes you were permitted to wear, the type of carriage you could ride in, and even the grandeur of the funeral you were entitled to upon your death. Most crucially, it predetermined the highest government office you could ever hope to attain, creating a ceiling that no amount of talent or merit could break through. For centuries, this rigid structure provided Silla with remarkable stability. It created a clear, unchallengeable social order that minimized internal power struggles among the elite, as everyone knew their predetermined place. This stability likely allowed the kingdom to focus its energies on expansion and cultural development, contributing to its long-term success and eventual dominance over the Korean peninsula. However, the inherent weakness of the bone rank system would eventually become its undoing. By the late 9th century, the pool of sacred bone royalty had dwindled, leading to succession crises and a weakening of central authority. More importantly, the system actively stifled social mobility and talent. Ambitious and capable individuals from lower ranks were permanently barred from positions of real power, breeding resentment and inefficiency. As the central government weakened, powerful regional lords who had been held back by this rigid hierarchy began to break away, declaring their own independent kingdoms. The very structure that had created Silla's strength ultimately led to its fragmentation, paving the way for its absorption into the new, unified state of Goryeo. The Silla kingdom's legacy is thus a paradox of breathtaking beauty and inflexible order, a civilization whose golden splendor was both its greatest achievement and a key factor in its eventual decline. But long before the Roman legions marched and the Republic was founded, the Italian peninsula was dominated by a people of profound sophistication and lingering mystery, the Etruscans. Emerging in the region they called Etruria, roughly modern-day Tuscany, their civilization reached its peak between the 8th and 5th centuries before Common Era, a period when Rome itself was little more than a modest collection of huts on the hills above the Tiber River. The Etruscans were the true masters of pre-Roman Italy, a confederation of 12 powerful city-states that formed a wealthy and influential league, controlling trade routes and amassing fortunes from rich deposits of copper and iron. Their society was vibrant, luxurious, and deeply spiritual, a culture that would provide the nascent Roman state with the essential blueprint for its own future glory. One of the most immediate and visible Etruscan gifts to Rome was in the realm of urban design and sacred architecture. The Romans themselves credited the Etruscans with teaching them how to build a proper city. When the Romans set out to construct their first major temple, the famed temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, they did not look to the Greeks for inspiration. They summoned Etruscan artisans and architects. The Etruscan temple was distinct from the Greek model. It was not meant to be viewed from all sides as a perfect sculpture, but rather as a stage set for ritual, raised on a high platform with a deep porch supported by rows of wooden columns and a brightly painted terracotta roof. This focus on the facade would become a central tenet of later Roman temple design. Furthermore, the Etruscans are credited with engineering one of Rome's most iconic structures, the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that drained the swampy Forum Valley and transformed it into the functional heart of the city. This mastery of hydraulics and civil engineering was a hallmark of their civilization, evident in their own well-drained cities and sophisticated irrigation systems. Beyond bricks and mortar, the Etruscans shaped the very soul of early Roman religious and political life. The Roman practice of divination, the art of interpreting the will of the gods by reading signs in nature, was almost entirely Etruscan in origin. The highly specialized rituals of reading the livers of sacrificed animals, known as hepatoscopy, or interpreting the flight patterns of birds, were disciplines Romans learned from Etruscan priests, or haruspices. These priests used a bronze model of a liver, divided into sections corresponding to different deities, to train in this complex art. The symbols of political power in Rome were also Etruscan imports. The fasces, the bundle of rods with an axe that symbolized a magistrate's power to punish and execute, the curule chair upon which high officials sat, and even the triumphant general's purple-bordered toga were all adopted from Etruscan tradition. The very concept of the Roman triumphal parade, where a victorious general rode a chariot through the city, has its roots in Etruscan ceremony. Despite their profound influence, the Etruscans remain shrouded in mystery, primarily because of their language. Unlike Latin, which is an Indo-European language related to Greek and Sanskrit, Etruscan is a linguistic isolate. It is unrelated to any other known language family, a pre-Indo-European tongue that stood alone in the region. We can read their inscriptions. They adopted and adapted the Greek alphabet, so the letters are familiar. Tens of thousands of Etruscan texts survive, but the vast majority are short funerary inscriptions that give little more than names. Without a lengthy bilingual text, like the Rosetta Stone, the core vocabulary and grammar remain elusive. We understand words for family relations and numbers, and we can glean some meaning from context on ritual objects, but their literature, their history, and their rich mythology are lost to us. A silent library of untranslated texts that prevents us from hearing their own story in their own words. This linguistic puzzle fuels the enduring debate over their origins. The ancient historian Herodotus claimed they migrated from Lydia in Anatolia, fleeing a severe famine. Another theory, championed by Dionysius of Halicarnassus, argued they were indigenous to Italy, a people who had always been there. Modern archaeology and genetic studies have begun to shed some light, suggesting a complex picture where the Etruscan culture developed locally from the earlier Villeneuve and Iron Age society, but with significant influence from sophisticated Eastern Mediterranean traders, perhaps explaining the exotic and non-Indo-European elements of their language. Their eventual assimilation into the Roman world was not a sudden conquest, but a gradual absorption over centuries. As Rome grew in military and political strength, it began to challenge and then overpower the individual Etruscan city-states, one by one. The process was completed by the 1st century before Common Era, after the Social War, when full Roman citizenship was extended to all of Etruria. Their unique language faded, replaced by Latin, and their distinct cultural practices were slowly submerged within the overwhelming tide of Roman identity. Yet, they never truly vanished. The essence of the Etruscans lived on in the very foundations of Roman civilization, in the rituals of its priests, the symbols of its senators, and the engineering of its greatest city, a silent, foundational layer upon which an empire was built. Leaving behind the grand cities and empires that rose along great rivers, our journey now takes us into the heart of the Arabian Desert, a vast and unforgiving landscape that nonetheless gave birth to remarkable civilizations whose wealth and power were forged not by agriculture, but by trade. Here, the control of knowledge and caravan routes was more valuable than any army, and 3 cultures in particular, the Nabateans, the Thamud, and the Lehianites mastered this desert world, leaving behind whispers of their existence carved into the very rock itself. The most famous of these by far are the Nabateans, a people who transformed a hidden desert canyon into one of the most breathtaking cities the ancient world has ever seen. Emerging as a major power around the 4th century before Common Era, the Nabateans were not farmers or conquerors in the traditional sense. They were the supreme masters of the incense trade. They controlled the flow of incredibly valuable commodities, frankincense, myrrh, spices, and silks, that moved on camel caravans from the southern tip of Arabia up to the bustling markets of the Mediterranean world. Their genius lay in their absolute command over water in a land defined by its absence. They developed revolutionary techniques for harvesting and conserving every precious drop of rainwater, building an intricate network of dams, cisterns, and underground channels that allowed them to sustain their caravans and their population across hundreds of miles of arid terrain. This expertise reached its ultimate expression in their capital, Petra. The approach to this city is an experience designed for awe. You would first navigate a narrow, winding sandstone canyon called the Sick, with cliffs towering 200 feet overhead, before emerging directly in front of the city's most magnificent facade, Al-Khazne, or the Treasury. This was not a building constructed from the ground up, but an entire temple complex painstakingly carved from the living rock of the cliff face, its classical columns and statues glowing with a stunning palette of rose, orange, and red. Beyond this iconic structure lay a sprawling city of tombs, temples, theaters, and homes, all hewn directly from the mountainside. Petra was more than a city. It was a fortress, a warehouse, and a dazzling display of Nabatean power designed to intimidate and impress the wealthy merchants who traveled there to do business. Their decline was a slow process of diminishing relevance, as the Roman Empire increasingly shifted trade to maritime routes via the Red Sea. The overland caravan routes that were the source of Nabatean wealth began to dry up. A massive earthquake in 363 Common Era crippled the city's infrastructure, and Petra was gradually abandoned to the sands, its secrets kept by local Bedouin tribes for centuries. Long before the Nabateans rose to prominence, however, the vast deserts of northwestern Arabia were home to another powerful people, the Thamud. Flourishing from roughly the first millennium before Common Era to around the 2nd century Common Era, the Thamud are a civilization known to us primarily through their prolific rock art and inscriptions, thousands of which are scattered across the landscape of the Hijaz region. These carvings, etched onto the faces of sandstone mountains and cliffs, provide a vivid, if fragmented, portrait of their world. The panels depict scenes of daily life and power, majestic camels, ibexes with sweeping horns, and most notably, detailed images of armed warriors on horseback and camelback, often engaged in hunting or battle. This art was more than decoration. It was a form of communication, a way to mark territory, record events, and proclaim social status. The Thamud also developed their own script, known as Thamudic, which appears in countless short inscriptions alongside the artwork. While we can read the letters, the brevity of the texts, usually just names or short dedications, means we have yet to fully understand their language or history. The Thamud hold a unique place in history, as they are one of the few ancient Arabian peoples mentioned in later religious texts. The Quran references them as an example of a society that was destroyed by divine punishment for their arrogance and rejection of prophetic warnings. This theological narrative, while not a historical account, reflects a cultural memory of a powerful and prosperous civilization that ultimately met a sudden and catastrophic end. Archaeologically, their decline is often linked to a combination of factors, including overuse of limited resources, inter-tribal warfare, and the relentless southward push of the Roman Empire, which disrupted the older trade networks they depended on. Sharing this ancient stage and often overlapping with the Thamud were the Lihianites, who established a powerful kingdom centered on the oasis city of Dedan, a crucial stopping point on the caravan route. At their height between the 6th and 1st centuries before Common Era, the Lihianites controlled a significant territory in what is now northwestern Saudi Arabia, acting as middlemen in the trade between the spice-rich south and the empires of Egypt and the Levant. Their capital, Dedan, was a thriving urban center built around a reliable water source, featuring temples, tombs, and workshops. The Lihianites were highly organized, with a structured monarchy and a sophisticated administration that managed the flow of goods and taxed the caravans that passed through their territory. Their most significant intellectual achievement was the development of their own distinct script, derived from earlier Arabian alphabets. The Dedanite script, as it is known, has been found on hundreds of inscriptions, ranging from monumental royal decrees carved on mountainsides to simple graffiti on rocks, giving us invaluable glimpses into their language, their gods, and their political structure. They worshipped a pantheon of deities, with the god Dhu Gabat serving as their chief figure. Like their neighbors, the Lihianites adorned their landscape with rock art, but they are particularly famed for their monumental sculpture. They carved large, freestanding statues of their kings and deities, as well as magnificent lion sculptures that guarded their tombs and temples, demonstrating a highly developed artistic tradition. The decline of the Lihianite kingdom was a story of shifting allegiances and economic pressure. They were eventually absorbed into the growing Nabatean kingdom to their north, losing their political independence as Petra rose to dominate the regional trade. The old routes that had made Dedan wealthy were gradually superseded or came under the direct control of their powerful neighbors, and the Lihianite identity slowly faded into the cultural tapestry of the Nabatean world, their script falling out of use and their monuments slowly being reclaimed by the desert they once ruled. While the wealth of Axum was built on trade, their ambition and devotion were carved directly into the sky itself. The The most breathtaking and enduring symbols of their power are the immense stone obelisks, or stelae, that stand in silent testimony to the kingdom's engineering genius and royal vanity. These were not merely decorative monuments, they were funerary markers for the elite, towering over vast fields of subterranean tombs. The scale of these structures is almost incomprehensible. The largest of them, the Great Stele, is believed to have been the single largest piece of stone ever quarried and attempted to be erected in the ancient world. It measured an astonishing 33 meters in length, taller than a 10-story building, and is estimated to weigh 520 tons. While it fell and shattered during its attempted erection, its very attempt speaks to a level of confidence and organizational power that rivals the pyramid builders of Egypt. What makes these monoliths even more impressive is their sophisticated artistry. They are not crude pillars. They are masterfully carved to represent multi-story buildings. The Axumite stonemasons meticulously chiseled the granite to resemble a symbolic tower, complete with false doors at the base, representing the entrance to the tomb chamber below, and rows of windows on each ascending level. The largest standing obelisk, at 24 meters, even features a curved top, designed to mimic the crescent moon, a powerful religious symbol in the pre-Christian era. The process of their creation was a monumental undertaking. Using simple stone tools and round stone hammers, workers would painstakingly quarry the single block of stone, then carefully drag it on a lubricated slipway for miles to the main burial field. Erecting these giants required an incredible feat of engineering, likely involving ramps, ropes, and the coordinated labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Each obelisk was a permanent, unassailable declaration of a king's power, his connection to the divine, and his eternal presence in the landscape of Axum. This divine connection took on an entirely new dimension in the 4th century, an event that would fundamentally reshape the kingdom's identity and destiny. According to tradition, a young Syrian Greek philosopher named Frumentius was shipwrecked on the Axumite coast. Taken to the royal court, he eventually became a trusted tutor to the royal heirs. When one of these princes, Ezana, ascended to the throne, Frumentius found his opportunity. He reportedly persuaded the young king of Christianity's truth, and around 328 Common Era, Ezana made a momentous decision. He officially converted himself and his entire kingdom to Christianity, making Axum one of the very first nations in the world to embrace the faith as a state religion, predating even the Roman Empire's adoption under Theodosius. This conversion was more than a spiritual shift. It was a profound geopolitical and cultural realignment. Overnight, Axum found itself in a new religious community, intimately linking itself to the powerful Byzantine Empire to the north. This connection brought tangible benefits, closer diplomatic ties, shared theological exchanges, and potentially even greater trade privileges within the Christian Mediterranean world. Axumite coins from King Ezana's reign tell this story visually. The early coins feature the disc and crescent symbol of the pre-Christian deity Marum. But later issues, struck after his conversion, are unmistakably Christian, boldly stamped with the cross at their center. Yet, this new identity also came with a cost. Their conversion created a stark religious divide with their most important pagan trading partners. To their immediate south and east lay the powerful kingdom of Kush at Meroe and the myriad polytheistic tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, with whom Axum had maintained lucrative trade for centuries. Suddenly, the Axumites were ideological outsiders. While trade likely continued out of sheer economic necessity, the easy cultural exchange and deep diplomatic relationships that often grease the wheels of commerce may have become strained. The shared religious framework that once facilitated trust and partnership was gone, replaced by a new theological barrier. This growing sense of religious distinction, combined with the rising power of Islam in the 7th century which surrounded them, would gradually contribute to Axum's transformation from an outward-looking, cosmopolitan trade empire into a more inwardly focused, isolated Christian citadel, a fortress of faith protecting its ancient traditions on a highland plateau. High in the thin air of the Andes, at a breathtaking altitude of over 12,000 feet above sea level, lies the remains of a city that seems to defy the very limits of human ingenuity. This is Tiwanaku, the spiritual and political heart of a civilization that thrived on the shores of Lake Titicaca for 500 years, from around 500 to 1000 Common Era. In this harsh, wind-swept landscape where oxygen is scarce and frost can strike any night of the year, the Tiwanaku people didn't just survive. They engineered a flourishing society that became one of the most influential and powerful forces in the pre-Incan Andes. Their architectural and agricultural genius leaving a legacy that still baffles engineers and archaeologists today. Approaching the ceremonial core of Tiwanaku is an experience designed to inspire awe and disorientation. The city's layout was a vast, open-air temple, a physical manifestation of their cosmology. At its heart stands the Akapana, a massive, seven-tiered platform pyramid that once dominated the skyline. Unlike the solid earthen pyramids of other cultures, the Akapana was a feat of sophisticated hydrological engineering. Its core was not simply packed dirt. It was a complex network of stone-lined drains that channeled rainwater from the summit down through each successive level, finally funneling it out into a surrounding moat. This was not just a drainage system. Many scholars believe this flowing water was a central part of ritual ceremonies, a symbolic recreation of the sacred mountains that were the source of all life-giving water. The entire structure was a monumental act of landscape engineering, blurring the line between a built temple and a natural, sacred mountain. But the true signature of Tiwanaku's architectural mastery, the feature that has captivated explorers for centuries, is their otherworldly skill with stone. The builders of this city were unmatched stonemasons. They quarried enormous blocks of andesite and sandstone from sites miles away, transporting them across the flat altiplano without the wheel, without draft animals, and without a written language to guide them. Their most famous structure, the Kalasayasaya, is a vast rectangular platform entered through a single monolithic gateway, and it is here we find the most iconic artifact of Tiwanaku, the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single, gigantic block of stone, this gateway is topped with an intricate frieze depicting a central, imposing figure believed to be their creator deity, Viracocha, who is surrounded by 48 winged figures that appear to be running toward him in reverence. The precision of this carving, with its sharp, clean lines and complex iconography, is stunning enough, but it is the construction of the walls surrounding it that truly defies belief. The stones of the Kalasayasaya are cut with such geometric perfection that they lock together like a three-dimensional puzzle. They used no mortar whatsoever. Instead, they employed a technique known as ashlar masonry, where each block was painstakingly shaped with hammer stones and abrasive sand to create perfectly flat faces and complex, interlocking angles. Some of the largest foundation stones, known as lipstones, have small, precisely cut notches where the next stone would be seated, ensuring a fit so tight that, even today, you cannot slide a razor blade between them. This incredible precision was not merely for show. It was a sophisticated and necessary response to their environment. This part of the world is seismically active, frequently shaken by earthquakes. A rigid, mortared wall would crack and crumble, but Tiwanaku's interlocking, mortar-less walls could shift and settle during a tremor, dancing with the Earth's movement before settling back into place, standing strong for over a millennium. This architectural brilliance was matched, and perhaps even surpassed, by their agricultural innovation. Sustaining a large urban population at such a high altitude, with a short growing season and the constant threat of frost, seems like an impossible task. Yet the Tiwanaku solved it with a system of raised field agriculture, or sukakalas, that was nothing short of revolutionary. They transformed the marshy, seasonally flooded plains along the shores of Lake Titicaca into a vast, productive grid of alternating canals and raised planting beds. These canals, filled with water, acted as thermal batteries. During the day, they absorbed the intense Andean sunlight. At night, they slowly released that stored heat, creating a protective microclimate that enveloped the crops growing on the raised beds and warded off the killing frost. The water in the canals also provided a constant source of moisture for the plants, and as it stagnated, produced nutrient-rich algae and organic matter that could be dredged up and used as a potent, natural fertilizer for the fields. The result was an agricultural engine of staggering productivity. Experimental reconstructions of these fields in modern times have shown that succucalis can produce up to 10 times the yield of traditional flat field farming in the same region. This system allowed Tiwanaku to support a densely populated urban center and fuel its expansion, creating a vast sphere of influence that reached from the Pacific coast to the tropical lowlands of the Amazon. For centuries, this combination of spiritual authority, architectural grandeur, and agricultural abundance made Tiwanaku a dominant power. Then, around 1000 Common Era, it all came to a sudden and devastating end. The city was not sacked by an invading army. There is no evidence of a violent uprising or a single catastrophic event. Instead, the evidence points to a slower, more insidious enemy, a prolonged and severe drought. Core samples taken from the bottom of Lake Titicaca and from nearby glaciers tell a grim story of a climatic shift that lasted for decades, perhaps even a century. The lake level dropped significantly, retreating far from the shore. The intricate system of raised fields, the very foundation of their wealth and power, began to fail. The canals dried up, losing their ability to regulate temperature. The fertile muck at their bottoms hardened into sun-baked clay. Crop yields plummeted, and famine likely spread through the population. In the face of this environmental catastrophe, the authority of the priestly elites in the city's ceremonial center would have collapsed. Their rituals and offerings to Viracocha had failed to bring the rain. The social contract that bound this vast region together shattered. People abandoned the great city, dispersing into smaller, more manageable family groups and migrating to lower, more forgiving elevations in search of water and food. The stones of Tiwanaku were left silent, their incredible precision a lasting monument to a civilization that mastered its world so completely, only to be undone by forces far beyond its control. Of all the civilizations that mastered their environment, few did so with such stunning, deliberate precision as the Hohokam people of the American Southwest. While cultures in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley built their societies around great rivers, the Hohokam performed a different kind of miracle. They looked upon the harsh, unforgiving Sonoran Desert, a land of blistering sun and unpredictable, ephemeral rivers, and saw not a barrier, but an opportunity. From around 300 Common Era to roughly 1450 Common Era, they transformed this arid landscape into a green and fertile breadbasket by constructing the largest and most sophisticated irrigation system in all of prehistoric North America. A network of human ingenuity so vast it would not be rivaled on the continent for over 1,000 years. Their achievement begins with water, or more accurately, with the masterful manipulation of its absence. The Hohokam homeland was centered on the Salt and Gila River valleys in what is now central Arizona. These were not mighty, perennial waterways like the Nile, but volatile desert rivers, prone to violent floods in the spring and then dwindling to a trickle or even drying up completely for the rest of the year. To survive, the Hohokam had to become masters of hydraulic engineering. They did not simply dig a few ditches. They engineered a truly monumental canal system. Using stone tools and woven baskets to move earth, they excavated over 500 miles of primary canals, with countless smaller distribution channels branching off like capillaries. These were not shallow grooves in the dirt. The main trunk lines were massive feats of earthworks, some reaching 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, capable of carrying tremendous volumes of water across astonishing distances. They built these canals with a precise, gravity-fed gradient, often as slight as 1 to 2 feet per mile, a testament to their incredible skill in surveying the land over long distances without modern instruments. This immense network siphoned water from the rivers and delivered it to fields growing corn, beans, squash, and cotton, sustaining a population that likely numbered in the tens of thousands across numerous villages. The scale of this cooperative labor implies a highly organized society, one capable of planning, mobilizing, and maintaining this lifeline for generations. This technological prowess was mirrored by a rich and complex cultural life, one that reveals deep connections to the sophisticated civilizations far to the south. The Hohokam built more than just canals. They constructed large, centralized public architecture that served as the heart of their communities. Most striking are their ball courts. Found at major villages like Snaketown, These were large, oval-shaped depressions sunk into the earth, with earthen berms outlining the playing field. They are strikingly similar in form to the much larger grand ball courts of Mesoamerica, where the ritual ball game was far more than a sport. It was a sacred reenactment of cosmological myths, often tied to themes of life, death, and regeneration. While we do not know the exact rules or spiritual significance of the Hohokam game, the presence of these courts is powerful evidence of a vast interaction sphere. Ideas, goods, and cultural practices were flowing north along trade routes, connecting the desert farmers of Arizona to the majestic worlds of the Maya and the Aztecs. Later in their history, their architectural focus shifted from these sunken courts to something new: massive, flat-topped platform mounds made of earth and clay. These structures, which could be several feet high and faced with adobe, served as elevated foundations for important buildings, likely the homes of emerging elites, temples for religious leaders, or spaces for community ceremonies. This shift toward elevated, staged architecture further echoes the pyramid platforms of Mesoamerica and suggests a parallel social evolution. Hohokam society appears to have been becoming more complex and perhaps more hierarchical, with power and ritual increasingly centralized and elevated above the everyday world, both literally and figuratively. For all their ingenuity, the Hohokam civilization experienced a profound and complete collapse around 1450 Common Era. Their great canal networks fell into disuse and silted up. Their large villages were abandoned. The people seemed to have dispersed into much smaller, mobile groups. The cause of this collapse was not a single event, but a perfect storm of environmental and social challenges that their brilliant system could not ultimately withstand. One primary suspect is salinization. Centuries of irrigation in a hot, dry climate have a devastating side effect. Water evaporates, leaving behind mineral salts in the soil. Over generations, these salts accumulate to toxic levels, eventually poisoning the land and making it impossible to grow crops. The very technology that allowed them to flourish may have slowly sterilized their fields. They were also victims of their own success. Their large, dense population was entirely dependent on the stability of their engineered landscape. A series of severe floods, which their canal network would have been designed to mitigate, could have become catastrophic if they breached critical sections of the infrastructure, requiring a massive labor investment to repair that a strained society could no longer muster. Furthermore, a prolonged period of drought would have reduced the flow of the very rivers their entire system depended on, leaving the canals dry and useless. It is likely that a combination of these factors, salinization, floods, and drought, eroded the agricultural surplus that supported their population and their complex social structure. The authority of the leaders who managed the water would have evaporated along with the river flow, leading to social unrest, a loss of faith in the system, and ultimately, a decision to abandon the grand experiment. The Hohokam did not vanish. Their descendants are believed to be among the modern Owadam peoples, but their incredible civilization, a testament to human adaptation, serves as a powerful and poignant lesson in the delicate balance between conquering a landscape and living in harmony with it. Far to the north of the Kingdom of Kush, in the most implausible of settings, another African civilization performed its own miracle of engineering. Imagine the heart of the Sahara Desert, a vast, searing expanse of sand and rock, one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Now picture that same landscape dotted with bustling towns, lush fields of wheat and dates, and fortified cities thriving on trade. This was not a mirage. This was the world of the Garamantes, a formidable people who ruled the Libyan desert for over 1,000 years and forged an empire not by conquering green lands, but by creating them from nothing. Their story begins with a simple, life-giving resource, fossil water. Deep beneath the arid sands lay the vast reserves of the Nubian sandstone aquifer, a prehistoric lake trapped during a time when the Sahara was a verdant grassland. The genius of the Garamantes was in their ability to reach this ancient water. They did not rely on unpredictable surface wells. They became masters of a sophisticated underground irrigation technology known as fagaras, or in Arabic, kanats. This was a system they likely learned from Persian or Mesopotamian influences, and then perfected for their own brutal environment. Building a fagara was a monumental communal effort. Workers would dig a series of vertical shafts, spaced about 30 feet apart, deep into the desert floor until they hit the water table. Then, at the very bottom, they would dig a gently sloping horizontal tunnel, connecting the bases of all the shafts, which would allow the groundwater to flow slowly by gravity over many miles. The vertical shafts provided crucial access for construction, maintenance, and ventilation. This network of tunnels, which could stretch for kilometers, acted like a subterranean river, silently and efficiently channeling water from the aquifer to the arid fields and settlements on the surface without a single drop being lost to the evaporating desert sun. The scale of this undertaking is almost unimaginable. Recent surveys have identified over 500 miles of these underground channels, a testament to a society capable of organizing and sustaining such a colossal, long-term public works project. This hydraulic mastery allowed the Garamantes to build a powerful state centered on a string of fortified towns, with their capital at Garama, modern-day Jerma in Libya. These were not simple oases, they were complex urban centers with distinct social classes. The Garamantian heartland supported a population of up to 50,000 people, alongside tens of thousands of domesticated animals, all sustained by the water pulled from the deep earth. Their society was led by a king and a warrior elite, who lived in multi-story mud brick compounds and were buried in elaborate stone-lined tombs, often accompanied by valuable grave goods. Their wealth, however, was not built on agriculture alone. Their true power came from their strategic position astride the emerging trans-Saharan trade routes. They became the indispensable middlemen, the masters of the desert caravans, using horse-drawn chariots and later camels, which they were among the first in the region to adopt. They patrolled and controlled the desert tracks. They facilitated the exchange of luxury goods between the Mediterranean world of the Romans and Carthaginians to the north and the complex cultures of sub-Saharan Africa to the south. Roman glass, wine, and metalwork would travel south through Garamantian territory, while in return, they traded for gold, ivory, and perhaps most lucratively, human captives from the south, whom they would then sell north into the Roman slave market. This trade brought them immense wealth and influence, allowing them to import goods and ideas that further enriched their already sophisticated culture. For centuries, this system worked. The Garamantes were not the simple barbarian nomads described by their Roman enemies. They were a literate people with their own written language, a script related to ancient Berber, and they maintained a complex, settled agricultural society in the middle of nowhere. But the very foundation of their civilization contained the seeds of its own destruction. The fossil water they were tapping was not a renewable resource. It had been laid down tens of thousands of years ago, and they were extracting it at a rate far faster than it could ever be replenished by the minuscule amounts of Saharan rainfall. Slowly, inexorably, the water table began to drop. Maintaining the fagaras became a desperate, losing battle. As the aquifer fell, the tunnels had to be dug deeper and longer, requiring exponentially more labor to keep them clear of sand and functioning. It was a vicious cycle of diminishing returns. A prolonged period of drought may have accelerated the crisis, placing even greater strain on the dwindling resource. By the 5th century of the Common Era, the system was beginning to fail. The fields that had once been green began to shrivel. The agricultural surplus that supported their urban population, their warrior class, and their long-distance trade began to vanish. Without that surplus, their political structure and economic power unraveled. The great trade routes that had been their lifeline to the outside world slowly shifted east or fell into disuse. Their fortified cities, once symbols of power, were gradually abandoned to the encroaching sands. The Garamantes did not vanish in a single cataclysm, but faded away over centuries, their people likely assimilating into the nomadic Berber tribes that would come to dominate the region. Their story is one of the most stark and powerful cautionary tales in human history, a brilliant civilization that conquered the desert by tapping into the water of a lost age, only to discover that such a resource, once gone, could never be reclaimed. Yet another chapter in the story of human movement and cultural fusion unfolds not along a mighty river, but along the arid, shifting tracks of the Silk Road. In the harsh, landlocked heart of Central Asia, where the formidable Taklamakan Desert reigns supreme, two remarkable peoples, the Tocharians and the Yuezhi, carved out destinies that would bridge the worlds of the East and West, leaving behind mysteries that continue to reshape our understanding of ancient history. Our journey into this world begins with the Tocharians, a people whose very existence presents a fascinating historical puzzle. For centuries, the dominant narrative held that early China was an isolated civilization, surrounded by nomadic, barbarian tribes. The discovery of the Tocharian mummies in the parched sands of the Tarim Basin completely upended this idea. These weren't the expected East Asian remains. These were individuals with startlingly European features: tall stature, long noses, deep-set eyes, and light-colored hair, often preserved in stunning detail by the dry desert air. They were dressed in beautifully woven woolen textiles, including brightly colored tartan patterns that wouldn't look out of place in Celtic Europe. Dated as far back as 1800 before Common Era, these mummies prove that a population of Western origin had reached the furthest frontiers of China thousands of years before the Silk Road was officially established, challenging everything we thought we knew about prehistoric migration. But the Tocharians were far more than just physical anomalies. They were a sophisticated urban culture. They built a network of thriving oasis city-states, such as Kucha and Turfan, which became vital way stations on the northern Silk Road. These were not mere tent camps for nomads. They were fortified towns with Buddhist monasteries, bustling markets, and sophisticated irrigation systems that turned the desert margins into green, productive land. Their greatest intellectual legacy, however, lies in the libraries of these monasteries. When archaeologists uncovered manuscripts here, they expected to find texts in Chinese or Tibetan. Instead, they found documents written in a language no one had ever seen before. Linguistic analysis revealed something astonishing. Tocharian was an Indo-European language. This placed it in the same vast language family as Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and English, but it was separated from its nearest linguistic cousins by thousands of miles and years of isolation. It was as if a long-lost cousin of the ancient Romans had been found living at the gates of China. These texts, mostly Buddhist translations and commercial documents, reveal a people who had adapted the Indian Brahmi script to write their own unique tongue, serving as cultural middlemen who helped transmit Buddhism from India into China. While the Tocharians were establishing their sedentary oasis kingdoms, another powerful group was moving through the Central Asian steppes, the Yuezhi. Originally a confederation of nomadic tribes based in what is now western China's Gansu province, the Yuezhi were renowned as formidable horsemen and wealthy traders who controlled the lucrative jade trade between China and Central Asia. Their prosperity, however, made them a target. In the 2nd century before Common Era, they were utterly defeated in a series of wars by their rivals, the Xingnu Confederation. The Yuezhi king was killed, and his skull was famously turned into a drinking cup by the Xingnu leader. This catastrophic defeat triggered a mass migration westward, a desperate journey that would have profound and unintended consequences across the continent. The displaced Yuezhi pushed west, themselves displacing other nomadic groups like the Saka, and eventually settling in the region of Bactria in northern Afghanistan. Here, they underwent a remarkable transformation. Over the course of a few generations, they evolved from nomadic pastoralists into the rulers of a settled, sophisticated empire. They coalesced into a unified state and became known to the world by a new name, the Kushans. Under the leadership of their great emperor Kanishka, the Kushan Empire became one of the 4 great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Parthia, and Han China, controlling a vast territory from Central Asia deep into the Indian subcontinent. The Kushan period represents a breathtaking fusion of cultures. They became passionate patrons of Buddhism, funding the construction of immense stupas and monasteries along the trade routes they controlled. But the art they sponsored, known as Gandharan art, is a unique hybrid style. It depicts the Buddha and other figures with the realistic, muscular anatomy of classical Greek sculpture, often dressed in robes that ripple and fold in a Hellenistic manner. This syncretic style emerged because the Kushans ruled over a population that had once been part of Alexander the Great's empire, where Greek influence remained deeply ingrained. The Gutians also became incredibly wealthy, issuing vast quantities of gold coins that feature a fascinating blend of imagery: Greek, Iranian, and Hindu deities alongside portraits of their own emperors, often inscribed in Greek script. They didn't just facilitate trade on the Silk Road. They actively created the economic and cultural stability that allowed ideas, religions, and goods to flow seamlessly between the Roman Empire and China. The fates of both the Terracotta and the Gutians were ultimately sealed by the relentless expansion of larger, land-based empires. The Terracotta oasis cities, for all their cultural brilliance, were small and politically fragmented. They were eventually absorbed by the westward expansion of the Tibetan Empire and later the Uyghur Khaganate, their unique language fading away as the populations adopted the tongues of their new rulers. The mighty Gutian Empire, after centuries of dominance, was gradually eroded and then conquered by the rising power of the Persian Sasanian Empire from the west, and later faced pressure from new nomadic confederations and the expansion of the Gupta Empire in India. Their vast territory was chopped up and absorbed, their distinct identity dissolving into the cultural mix of the regions they once ruled. What remains of them today are the silent, solemn mummies in the desert, the scattered manuscripts in a long-dead language, and the exquisite Greco-Buddhist sculptures of Gandhara. They stand as a powerful testament to a truth that we are only now fully appreciating. The ancient world was far more interconnected than we ever imagined. Long before globalization, the Terracotta and the Ueji were the living links in a chain of exchange that stretched across the continents, proving that human history has always been a story of movement, adaptation, and the incredible resilience of culture. While we often look to mainland Greece for the origins of European civilization, the true birthplace of its advanced culture lies on the sun-drenched island of Crete. Here, the Minoan civilization flourished from roughly 3000 to 1100 before Common Era, creating a society so vibrant, sophisticated, and unique that it stands apart from everything that came before or after in the ancient world. They were Europe's first advanced civilization, a maritime empire built not on conquest and fortification, but on trade, artistry, and a seemingly joyful embrace of life. A culture whose mysterious collapse would birth one of history's most enduring legends. The heart of their world was not a city in the traditional sense, but a palace. These were not mere royal residences. They were the sprawling, multifunctional economic, religious, and administrative centers of Minoan society. The greatest of them all was the magnificent complex at Knossos, a structure so vast and complex that it would later inspire the Greek myth of the labyrinth. Imagine approaching this architectural wonder, a bewildering, multi-storied arrangement of over 1,000 rooms connected by a seemingly chaotic network of long corridors, tight stairways, and sudden courtyards. The layout was intentionally disorienting, designed not with the rigid, symmetrical order of later Greek temples, but as an organic, sprawling organism that seemed to grow from the earth itself. This labyrinthine design likely served a profound ritual purpose, guiding initiates through a physical and spiritual journey during religious ceremonies, a tangible expression of their complex cosmology. Stepping inside, you would be struck not by gloom, but by light and color. Unlike the fortified, inward-looking citadels of their Mycenaean neighbors, the Minoan palaces were remarkably open. They featured large, central courtyards, grand staircases with light wells that funneled sunshine deep into the building's core, and an ingenious system of ventilation that kept the air fresh. The walls themselves were living things, covered from floor to ceiling with brilliantly painted frescoes that pulsed with energy and naturalism. These artworks depict a world of grace and movement, lithe acrobats leaping over the horns of a charging bull, elegant women in elaborate flounced dresses conversing in a garden, and dolphins dancing through cerulean seas. There are no scenes of warfare, no images of a king dominating his enemies. Instead, the art celebrates nature, ritual, and community, offering a window into a society that appeared to value beauty, athleticism, and a deep connection to the natural world. This vibrant, peaceful image is further reinforced by a conspicuous absence. The Minoan palaces, for all their grandeur, lack any significant fortifications. There are no massive defensive walls, no strategically placed ramparts designed to repel an invading army. This is perhaps their most defining and puzzling characteristic. In a violent and competitive age, the Minoans felt secure enough to build their centers of power as open, welcoming complexes. This suggests that their might was projected not by land armies, but by their unmatched naval prowess. They ruled the waves of the eastern Mediterranean, their sturdy, oar-powered ships forming a thalassocracy, an empire of the sea, that protected their island home and controlled lucrative trade networks stretching from Egypt and the Levant to the Aegean Islands and mainland Greece. Their power was economic and cultural. Their influence spread not through fear, but through the allure of their exquisite goods and advanced ideas. Yet for all we can see and admire about their society, the Minoans hold onto their most intimate secrets tightly, primarily because we cannot hear their voices. They developed two writing systems. Their earliest script, Cretan hieroglyphic, remains largely undeciphered. Later, they developed a more cursive form of writing known as Linear A, which was used for administrative records on clay tablets across the island. While we can recognize the numerical and measurement systems on these tablets, the language itself, the words, and the grammar defies all attempts at translation. It is a linguistic isolate, unrelated to any known language family, and without a bilingual Rosetta Stone. The thoughts, poetry, laws, and names of the Minoan people remain locked away, a silent history we can only observe from the outside. This profound mystery is perfectly encapsulated in a single, mesmerizing object, the Phaistos disc. Discovered in the Palace of Phaistos, this fired clay disc, dating to around 1700 before Common Era, is covered on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols. Flowers, birds, human figures, and ships' 45 distinct signs in total are arranged in clear groups that seem to represent words or phrases. Astoundingly, it is the world's oldest known example of movable type printing, each symbol pressed into the clay with a separate seal. But with no other examples ever found, the disc is an enigma. Is it a hymn, a narrative, a legal document, or a board game? We simply do not know. It is a haunting reminder that for all our discoveries, the voices of the Minoans are still just whispers on the wind, a sophisticated language we see but cannot hear. Their vibrant world met a sudden and catastrophic end around 1450 before Common Era. The prevailing theory points to a cataclysm of almost unimaginable scale, the colossal volcanic eruption on the island of Thura, modern-day Santorini, just 70 miles north of Crete. This was not a minor event. It was one of the largest volcanic explosions in human history, estimated to be many times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa. The initial cataclysm would have sent a towering tsunami, hundreds of feet high, racing across the Aegean Sea to smash into the northern coast of Crete, devastating its vital ports and fleet. This would have been followed by a relentless rain of volcanic ash and pumice, blanketing the island, smothering crops, and rendering farmland useless for years. The ensuing volcanic winter would have caused global climate anomalies, leading to failed harvests and famine. The Minoan civilization, built on maritime trade and agriculture, could not withstand such a coordinated assault from the natural world. Their fleet was destroyed, their economy shattered, and their population decimated. In this weakened state, they became vulnerable to invasion from the mainland. The Mycenaean Greeks, who had long been influenced by Minoan culture, saw their opportunity and moved in, taking control of Knossos and the other palaces. The Minoans did not vanish entirely, but their unique cultural identity was subsumed and absorbed by the rising Mycenaean culture, which adopted the Minoan linear script and adapted it to write their own language in what we call Linear B. The memory of this brilliant, lost culture and its terrifying end lived on in Greek mythology, transformed over centuries into the haunting legend of Atlantis. Plato's tale of a magnificent, advanced island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night of misfortune is a powerful echo of a very real catastrophe. Similarly, the great palace of Knossos, with its confusing, ruined corridors, inspired the myth of the labyrinth, the maze built by King Minos to contain the monstrous Minotaur. The Minoans, in their brilliance and their mystery, became the original source for these stories. a dazzling and sophisticated civilization that achieved greatness only to be erased by the very forces of nature they so celebrated. But to truly grasp their genius, we must look beyond the orderly streets and into the very infrastructure of their society, starting with something remarkably modern, their plumbing. The Minoans possessed an understanding of water management that would not be rivaled in Europe for over 1,000 years. In Knossos, archaeologists uncovered a sophisticated system that feels almost anachronistic. They built terracotta pipes that were finely tapered to increase water pressure and prevent clogging, connecting to a network of stone-lined drains that ran beneath the palace floors. Most astonishingly, they invented the world's first known flush toilets. These were elaborate stone seats with wooden covers, positioned above these drainage channels. A conduit of running water from a nearby container would be poured down to flush waste away through the complex subterranean sewers. This wasn't a crude novelty. It was a system designed for sanitation and comfort, reflecting a society deeply concerned with public health and urban living, a stark contrast to the world that would follow them. This mastery of their environment translated directly into their art, which bursts with a vibrancy and energy unlike anything else in the ancient world. The walls of their palaces were not mere stone. They were canvases alive with movement and color. Elaborate frescoes depicted a world of grace and power, from elegant court ladies in flounced dresses to dolphins dancing through cerulean seas. But one motif stands out above all others for its danger and dynamism: the bull-leaping ceremony. These breathtaking paintings show young acrobats, both male and female, performing what appears to be an incredibly dangerous gymnastic ritual. One athlete would grasp the charging bull's horns, using the animal's own thrust to somersault over its back into the arms of a catcher, waiting behind. This wasn't a savage blood sport. It was a highly stylized performance, likely a central religious rite that combined athleticism, courage, and a deep, symbolic connection to the potent power of the bull. The art captures a fleeting moment of perfect balance between human agility and raw animal force, a testament to a culture that celebrated grace under pressure. Yet, for all we can see and appreciate, the Minoans hold onto one secret tighter than any other: their language. We have two of their scripts. The earlier, called Cretan hieroglyphic, remains largely undeciphered. The later, Linear A, was used for administrative records and has been found on clay tablets across the island. While we can recognize the numerical and measurement systems, the language itself, the words, and the grammar defies all attempts at translation, isolating their thoughts and stories from us forever. This mystery is perfectly encapsulated in a single, mesmerizing object: the Phaistos disc. Discovered in the Palace of Phaistos, this fired clay disc, dating to around 1700 before Common Era, is covered on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols. Flowers, birds, human figures, and ships' 45 distinct signs in total are arranged in clear groups that seem to represent words or phrases. It is the world's oldest known example of movable type printing, each symbol pressed into the clay with a separate seal. But without any other examples or a Rosetta Stone to provide a key, the disc remains a silent oracle. Is it a hymn, a narrative, a legal document, or a board game? We simply do not know. It is a haunting reminder that for all our discoveries, the voices of the Minoans are still just whispers on the wind. Their sudden and catastrophic collapse around 1450 before Common Era, likely triggered by the colossal volcanic eruption on Thura and subsequent invasion by the Mycenaeans, marked the end of their unique world. But their legacy was far from lost. The Mycenaean Greeks who took over Knossos adopted the Minoan Linear, a script, adapting it to write their own language in what we call Linear B, providing the first written evidence of the Greek language. Their artistic motifs, architectural principles, and even their maritime prowess seeped into the cultural DNA of the mainland Greeks, becoming a foundational layer of the mythology that would later inspire the classical world. The Minoans, in their brilliance and their mystery, became the original source for Plato's tale of Atlantis, a magnificent, advanced island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night, a powerful echo of a very real catastrophe that erased one of history's most fascinating cultures. What truly sets the Indus Valley civilization apart and continues to baffle archaeologists today is the sheer modernity of their urban design. Stepping into one of their cities like Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa would have been an experience unlike any other in the ancient world. Unlike the winding, organically grown alleyways of Mesopotamian cities or the ceremonial-centric layouts of Egypt, these were meticulously planned metropolises built on a strict grid pattern. The main streets, some as wide as 30 feet, ran straight north-south and east-west, dividing the city into large superblocks. These were then subdivided by smaller lanes into individual neighborhoods, creating an orderly and efficient layout that prioritized movement and access. This wasn't a design that evolved over centuries. It was a master plan executed with remarkable precision from the very beginning, suggesting a powerful, shared vision of what a city should be. This vision extended to the very bricks they built with. One of the most telling signs of their incredible organization is the standardization of their construction materials. Throughout the entire vast expanse of the civilization, from the shores of the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas, they used fired bricks of a consistent, perfect ratio. The standard brick size was 1:2:4 in its dimensions, a proportion that made them incredibly strong and easy to stack in alternating courses for stability. This uniformity is astounding. It implies the existence of a central authority that could impose and maintain such strict building codes across thousands of square miles, or at the very least, a deeply ingrained cultural consensus on how to build. It speaks to a society that valued order, efficiency, and a remarkably high quality of life for its citizens. That quality of life is most evident in what is arguably their greatest engineering achievement, a sophisticated and comprehensive public sanitation system that was millennia ahead of its time. Every single house, from the largest courtyard mansion to the smallest two-room dwelling, was connected to this citywide network. Each home had its own bathing area with a sloped, watertight floor and a dedicated drain. Wastewater from these baths and from indoor latrines was channeled through underground clay pipes into the main sewer lines that ran beneath the city's streets. These sewers were massive, brick-lined tunnels large enough for a person to walk through, designed for regular maintenance and cleaning. At regular intervals, covered manholes provided access points, showing this was a system built to last and to be managed. This wasn't a luxury for the elite. It was a universal civic utility, a radical investment in public health that likely drastically reduced disease and set a standard for urban living that would not be seen again until the Roman Empire, and not matched until the 19th century. Their mastery of water didn't stop at waste removal. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro stands as a monumental example of their hydraulic engineering. This large, waterproofed pool, surrounded by a colonnade and rooms, was likely used for ritual purification ceremonies. It was fed by water from a large well, with a corbelled arch drain to efficiently empty it. The city was also dotted with hundreds of wells, providing fresh, clean water to every neighborhood, and ensuring that the daily needs of the population were met without having to travel to a distant river. This intricate dance of bringing fresh water in and efficiently taking wastewater out reveals a society that had an almost obsessive concern with cleanliness, order, and the management of its environment on a grand scale. All of this breathtaking coordination inevitably leads to one of the great unresolved debates in archaeology. How were they governed? The conspicuous absence of obvious palaces, grandiose royal tombs, or monumental statues of warrior kings, the standard trappings of power everywhere else in the ancient world, leaves a vacuum where we expect to find a ruler. This has led many scholars to propose a fascinating theory, that the Indus Valley civilization might have been a collection of largely independent city-states, governed not by a single all-powerful king, but by a council of elites, perhaps merchants, priests, or elders. In this model, their astonishing uniformity wouldn't be the result of imperial decree from a single capital, but rather a shared cultural and ideological framework, a common set of beliefs and practices that every city adhered to willingly. The focus on public works over palaces could suggest a more collective, perhaps even oligarchic or proto-democratic, form of administration. On the other side of the debate, other experts argue that this level of standardization over such a vast area simply must indicate a strong, centralized state. They point to the evidence of long-distance trade, the coordinated defense of cities with massive, uniform fortifications, and the existence of large, central granaries that could have been used for taxing and redistributing grain. The rulers, in this view, may have been so secure in their power that they didn't need to boast about it with giant statues. Their authority was expressed through the flawless functioning of the city itself. The grid pattern of the streets, the universal brick size, the ubiquitous sanitation, these were the monuments to their power. A more subtle but infinitely more effective form of control that prioritized the health and order of the state over the glorification of a single individual. Without any deciphered written records to settle the argument, the true nature of their governance remains one of their most profound and compelling mysteries, a silent testament to a society that defies our easy categorizations. The civilization's decline around 1900 before Common Era is as enigmatic as its governance. There are no layers of ash from a cataclysmic invasion, no mass graves suggesting a violent end. Instead, the archaeological record shows a slow but steady unraveling. The meticulous urban standards begin to break down. New, poorer quality buildings are constructed over the tops of the main streets, disrupting the sacred grid pattern. The elaborate sanitation systems fall into disrepair and are abandoned. The long-distance trade networks that brought lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and carnelian from Gujarat seem to sputter and halt. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual fading, as if the central idea that held everything together was slowly forgotten. The most compelling explanation for this decline points not to a human enemy, but to an environmental one. Geological evidence suggests that the mighty river systems that were the lifeblood of the civilization underwent dramatic changes. The Gagarhakur River, which many scholars believe is the ancient Sarasvati River mentioned in Vedic texts, was a major artery running through the heart of the Harappan world. Core samples and satellite imagery reveal that this river began to shift its course and eventually dry up, transforming from a perennial flow into a seasonal trickle, and then into a barren ghost of its former self. This desiccation was likely caused by a combination of factors, including tectonic activity that diverted its headwaters and a larger shift in monsoon patterns. The life-giving rains became less reliable, leading to prolonged droughts. Without a consistent water source for their irrigation canals, the agricultural surplus that supported the vast urban population vanished. Faced with this environmental crisis, the response was not revolt, but a quiet migration. People began to abandon the great cities in search of more reliable water sources, moving east toward the Ganges River system and south into the Indian Peninsula. They took their culture and knowledge with them, but the complex, centralized, urban way of life could not be reassembled under the new, harsher climatic conditions. The great experiment in urban living came to a close, its legacy flowing silently into the foundations of the cultures that would follow across the Indian subcontinent. While the previous empires built their power on colossal armies and vast territories, our next civilization, flourishing on the Korean peninsula, achieved something arguably more difficult: enduring unity. The Silla Kingdom, one of the three kingdoms of Korea, didn't just conquer its rivals. It forged the first unified Korean state in 668 Common Era, establishing a cultural and political identity that would resonate for a millennium. Their story is one of brilliant diplomacy, fierce warrior ethics, and an almost mystical devotion to Buddhism that produced some of the most exquisite art the ancient world ever created. The unification of the peninsula was a masterstroke of strategic alliance. For centuries, Silla had coexisted and warred with its powerful neighbors, the Beech Kingdom to the west and the Goguryeo Kingdom to the north. Realizing it could not defeat them alone, Silla's rulers made a daring and controversial decision. They forged a military pact with the mighty Tang dynasty of China. This was a calculated risk, inviting a powerful foreign army onto Korean soil, but it worked. Together, they crushed the Beech and Goguryeo kingdoms. Then, in a stunning display of political cunning, the Silla forces promptly turned on their Tang allies and drove them out, securing a truly independent unified realm. This precarious diplomatic dance ensured that Korea would develop its own unique culture, rather than becoming just another Chinese province. The military backbone of this expansion was a legendary class of elite warriors known as the Hwarang, or Flowering Knights. These were not mere soldiers. They were a highly disciplined order of young aristocratic men who were trained in the arts of war, leadership, and spiritual cultivation. Their education was holistic, blending intense physical training in swordsmanship and archery with the study of philosophy, poetry, music, and dance. They followed a strict ethical code known as the Five Secular Precepts, which emphasized loyalty to the king, filial piety to one's parents, trust among friends, courage in battle, and a prohibition on taking life without just cause. The Hwarang were expected to be the epitome of Scylla's ideal, the cultured warrior poet, as graceful in a philosophical debate as they were lethal on the battlefield. They often traveled to sacred mountains and rivers to meditate and strengthen their bonds, their presence inspiring both awe and reverence among the populace and solidifying their role as the moral and martial pillars of the state. The immense wealth and power generated by this unified kingdom found its most dazzling expression in its capital city, Gyeongju, a metropolis so renowned for its splendor that it was celebrated across Asia as the City of Gold. Walking through its streets in its heyday would have been an experience of breathtaking opulence. The royal palace complexes were vast, and the aristocratic districts were filled with extravagant homes noted for their elaborate tile-roofed architecture. The city was a center of international culture, drawing scholars, merchants, and artisans from across China and beyond. But the true testament to its golden reputation lies beneath the earth. The valleys surrounding Gyeongju are dotted with massive burial mounds, the tumuli of Scylla's kings and queens. These are not simple graves. They are time capsules of almost unimaginable luxury. When archaeologists excavated these mounds, they found royal tombs packed with spectacular grave goods. There were thousands of exquisite gold ornaments, delicate glassware from as far away as the Roman Empire, and finely crafted weapons, all placed alongside the deceased to serve them in the afterlife. The sheer volume of gold alone confirms the historical descriptions of Gyeongju's wealth, revealing a court that lived and died surrounded by breathtaking magnificence. This golden age was not to last forever. The very system that provided Scylla with centuries of remarkable stability, the rigid bone rank class structure, contained the seeds of its eventual decay. This hereditary system dictated every aspect of life based on the purity of one's aristocratic bloodline, creating an immutable ceiling that prevented talented individuals from lower ranks from rising to positions of power. Over time, this led to deep-seated resentment among the marginalized elite and the general population, fostering inefficiency and stifling innovation. As the central authority of the Sacred Bone royalty waned due to succession disputes, powerful regional warlords, long held back by this inflexible hierarchy, began to assert their independence. The kingdom fractured from within, breaking apart into the later Three Kingdoms period. This internal weakness was compounded by growing external pressures from new nomadic empires like the Khitan to the north. By the early 10th century, the unified Scylla state was a shadow of its former self. A rebel leader named Wang Khan, capitalizing on this widespread discontent, eventually overthrew the last Scylla monarch and established the new Goryeo dynasty, bringing the golden age of Scylla to a close. Yet, its legacy was far from lost. The cultural and political foundations it laid for a unified Korean identity would endure long after its magnificent capital had faded from its golden glory. Towering over the highlands of what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea, the Kingdom of Axum represents a powerhouse of the ancient world that rivaled the great empires of Rome, Persia, and China. From its emergence around the 1st century Common Era to its peak in the 4th, Axum was not an isolated African kingdom, but a cosmopolitan, international player whose influence stretched across 3 continents. Its wealth and power were built on a simple but brilliant strategy. It controlled the most lucrative trade route of its era. Before the age of European sailing ships, the only way for the Roman Empire to access the incredible riches of India, the spices, silks, ivory, and exotic goods craved by its elite, was by sea through the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And sitting squarely at the mouth of this aquatic superhighway was Axum. Their bustling port of Adulis became the essential transshipment hub, where goods from the Mediterranean were exchanged for treasures from the east, with Axumite merchants taking a hefty commission on every transaction. This strategic control of trade generated staggering wealth, a fact immortalized not in scrolls, but in cold, hard currency. The Axumite kings were among the very few sub-Saharan rulers to mint their own coins, a bold declaration of economic independence and sovereignty. These weren't crude imitations. They were high-quality gold, silver, and bronze pieces, expertly struck and inscribed in Greek, the international language of commerce. The coins proudly bore the portraits of the reigning monarch, complete with their regnal names and Christian symbols after their conversion, allowing us to trace their dynastic lineage and proclaiming to traders from Alexandria to India that the kingdom of Axum was a financial force to be reckoned with. But the true monuments to Axum's ambition and engineering prowess are not its coins, but its breathtaking stele fields. These are not simple stone markers. They are among the most awe-inspiring and enigmatic funerary monuments ever constructed. Carved from single blocks of solid granite, these towering obelisks were designed to serve as enormous markers for the underground tombs of Axum's elite. The scale of these monoliths is almost incomprehensible. The largest of them, the Great Stele, is believed to have been the single largest piece of stone ever quarried and attempted to be erected in the ancient world. It measured an astonishing 33 meters in length and is estimated to weigh 520 tons. Though it fell and shattered during its attempted erection, its very attempt speaks to a level of confidence and organizational power that rivals the pyramid builders of Egypt. The largest standing obelisk stands 24 meters tall, a perfectly carved representation of a multi-story building, complete with false doors, multiple stories, and a curved top mimicking a crescent moon. The precision with which these giants were quarried, transported, and erected using nothing but simple tools and human labor remains a profound mystery, a silent testament to a society that could marshal incredible resources to honor its dead and project its power skyward for all to see. Beyond its earthly wealth and architectural marvels, Axum's legacy is deeply intertwined with one of the greatest spiritual mysteries of all time, the Ark of the Covenant. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark, the sacred chest containing the original stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, was brought to Axum from Jerusalem by Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. For centuries, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has claimed that this most revered biblical artifact resides within the chapel of the tablet, adjacent to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. A single, devoted monk is appointed as its lifelong guardian, the only person permitted to see the Ark, and he never leaves the chapel grounds. While its existence there can never be verified by outsiders, this powerful claim has endowed Axum with an aura of immense spiritual significance, transforming it from a historical capital into a living, sacred city and the heart of Ethiopian Christian identity. This belief underscores Axum's role not just as a commercial crossroads, but as a pivotal center of religious and cultural transmission. The decline of this mighty kingdom was not the result of a single battle, but a slow fading brought on by a shifting world. The primary blow was economic. In the 7th century, the rapid rise of Islam fundamentally redrew the map of global trade. Muslim armies swiftly conquered the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa, severing Axum's centuries-old connection to the Byzantine Empire and the Mediterranean trade network. As the new Islamic caliphates established their own, more northerly trade routes across the Sahara and through the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea route that had been Axum's lifeline became a backwater. Suddenly isolated and cut off from its primary source of wealth, the kingdom began to contract. This economic isolation was compounded by environmental pressures. Evidence suggests that centuries of intensive agriculture to support its population may have led to deforestation and soil exhaustion, reducing the land's productivity. A shifting climate may have also brought less reliable rainfall to the highlands. The combination of these factors, economic strangulation and environmental stress, slowly sapped the strength of the kingdom. Axum's power waned, its influence faded, and its great stelae were left to stand as silent sentinels over a civilization that had once been the equal of any on Earth, its incredible story waiting centuries to be rediscovered by the modern world. Leaving behind the sun-baked pyramids and classical worlds, Our journey now takes us back to a much deeper past, to the very dawn of civilization in Europe. Long before the pharaohs ruled Egypt or the first stones were laid at Stonehenge, a cluster of astonishingly advanced cultures flourished across southeastern Europe, creating a vibrant Neolithic world that rivaled anything in the Near East. These were not primitive tribes. They were sophisticated societies with sprawling cities, revolutionary technologies, and perplexing rituals, whose mysterious disappearances would leave a void for millennia. We group them together not because they were the same, but because they represent a forgotten golden age of prehistoric Europe, a flowering of culture and innovation whose secrets are only now being unearthed. Our first stop is the banks of the Danube in the Balkans, home to the Vinca culture. From around 5700 to 4500 years before Common Era, these people established one of the most advanced Neolithic societies Europe had ever seen. Their settlements, like the large site that gives them their name at Vinca below Brdo near modern-day Belgrade, were not simple villages. They were substantial, long-lasting communities of hundreds, even thousands of people, living in sturdy, rectangular houses built with wooden frames and walls of wattle and daub. The Vinca were pioneering metal workers, among the very first in the world to begin smelting copper. Their artisans would heat native copper ore in specially designed furnaces, reaching temperatures high enough to extract pure metal, which they then hammered and cast into exquisite tools, ornaments, and ritual objects. This mastery of pyrotechnology gave them a significant economic and social advantage, placing them at the forefront of the continent's technological progress. But their most tantalizing and controversial legacy is not made of metal, but of clay. The Vinca people produced a vast quantity of figurines and pottery, and on many of these objects, we find a series of mysterious symbols. These are not simple ownership marks or decorative patterns. They are a complex set of abstract signs that recur with consistent meaning across a wide geographical area and over many centuries. This has led some archaeologists to propose a breathtaking theory, that the Vinca symbols represent the earliest form of writing in the world, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by over 1,000 years. The symbols include combinations of lines, crosses, chevrons, and star-like motifs, and they appear on the bottom of cult vessels, on spindle whorls, and on figurines, often in groups that suggest a syntactic order. While the system remains undeciphered, and many scholars caution that it may be proto-writing rather than a full script capable of recording language, the possibility remains electrifying. It suggests a level of administrative or religious complexity in prehistoric Europe that we are only beginning to comprehend. Now, we travel north to the fertile plains between the Danube and Dniester rivers, a region encompassing parts of modern-day Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. Here, the Cucuteni Tripilia culture achieved something almost unimaginable for the Neolithic era. From around 5500 to 2750 before Common Era, they built the largest settlements in the world, dwarfing anything in contemporary Mesopotamia or Egypt. Their so-called megasites, like Talyinki and Maidenetsk in Ukraine, were vast, planned metropolitan areas covering hundreds of hectares and housing up to 20,000 people. Imagine a prehistoric metropolis larger than many classical Greek city-states, a pulsating hub of human activity in the middle of the European wilderness. Their houses were architectural marvels. They constructed massive, two-story dwellings arranged in concentric circles around a central open plaza. These were not crude huts. They were sophisticated homes with complex internal layouts, specialized rooms for different activities, and kilns for firing their iconic pottery. And what pottery it was! Cucuteni Tripilia ceramics are some of the most beautiful ever made, featuring intricate spiral and swirl motifs painted in striking black and red on a white background. A style so distinctive, it acts as a signature for their culture across the centuries. This was a society of astonishing artistic sensitivity and communal organization. Yet, this vibrant world was built on a foundation of a profound and haunting mystery. Archaeological evidence reveals that these massive settlements were not abandoned or conquered. They were deliberately and systematically burned down. And not just once. This was a recurring event, happening like clockwork every 60 to 80 years. The pattern is too consistent to be accidental warfare or a series of catastrophes. The burning was clearly intentional and orchestrated. The houses were filled with valuable objects, perfectly good pottery, tools, and ritual figurines, and then set ablaze. After the fire cooled, the site was often carefully cleaned. The ashes of the old houses were spread out, and an entirely new settlement was built directly on top, following almost the exact same street plan. This was a colossal, generational ritual of destruction and renewal. Why, we can only speculate. It may have been a way to purify the community, to eradicate spiritual pollution or disease. It could have been a means of resetting social hierarchies, preventing any one family from accumulating too much hereditary power. Or perhaps it was the ultimate offering to their gods, a willing sacrifice of their entire material world to ensure cosmic balance and agricultural fertility. The sheer scale of this practice, repeated for centuries, speaks to a shared, deep-seated belief so powerful it could compel an entire civilization to regularly commit its greatest achievements to the flames. Finally, we arrive on the shores of the Black Sea in modern-day Bulgaria, where the Varna culture performed a different kind of alchemy. Around 4,500 years before Common Era, while the rest of Europe was still in the Stone Age, these people discovered gold. Not just its existence, but its potential for transforming material into meaning. In 1972, archaeologists excavating a Varna necropolis made a discovery that would rewrite the history of metallurgy: the Varna gold treasure. In a single gravesite, they uncovered over 6 pounds of exquisite golden artifacts, beads, bracelets, ceremonial axes, and even a stunning gold penis sheath. This was not merely decorative wealth, it was a display of staggering social power and spiritual belief. The Varna cemetery reveals a society that had developed clear social stratification. Most graves were simple, with few grave goods, but a select few, like the famous burial 43, were spectacular. The individual buried here was a man of immense importance, laid to rest with a veritable king's ransom in gold, holding a ceremonial gold mace in his hand and wearing a gold-covered loincloth. The quantity and quality of the workmanship are unparalleled for the time, making this the oldest known hoard of gold artifacts in the world by centuries. The Varna culture had mastered the complex techniques of goldsmithing, learning to hammer, cast, and alloy the precious metal to create symbols of unchallengeable authority. This was the birth of a concept that would echo through history, that a rare and shining metal could embody and legitimize political and religious power. The end of these three brilliant cultures is as shrouded in mystery as their rituals. There is no evidence of a single, catastrophic invasion that wiped them out simultaneously. Instead, the prevailing theory points to a combination of climatic shifts and human movement. Around 4,200 years before Common Era, a major global climate event occurred, often linked to the collapse of ancient empires in the Near East. This period, known as the 4,200 before Common Era event, likely brought colder, drier conditions to southeastern Europe. The fertile plains that supported the massive agricultural surplus needed for the Cucuteni Tripilia mega sites may have failed. Drought would have strained the resources of the Vincha and Varna peoples as well. Into this power vacuum came new migrations, waves of pastoralist steppe peoples from the east, often identified with the early Yamnaya culture, began moving into the region. These were mobile societies, adept with horses and wheeled vehicles, and they may have overwhelmed the settled, agricultural societies they encountered, either through violent conflict or through a slower process of assimilation and cultural absorption. The great Neolithic cultures of old Europe did not vanish in a day, but their unique traditions, their artistic styles, and their mysterious rituals gradually faded, their legacy buried beneath the soil for over 5,000 years, waiting for us to rediscover their astonishing story. To truly understand the Elamites, we must first listen for their voice, a voice that remains hauntingly elusive because of their language. Unlike their neighbors in Mesopotamia, who spoke Akkadian or Sumerian languages part of the well-known Semitic and linguistic families, Elamite stands utterly alone. It is what linguists call a language isolate, a tongue with no demonstrable relationship to any other language on Earth, living or dead. This profound uniqueness means that every time we decipher an Elamite text, we are not simply translating words. We are decoding an entire worldview from scratch, with no related languages to provide clues or context. They adapted the cuneiform writing system from Mesopotamia to write their own words, but the meaning behind those wedges and lines is entirely their own. This linguistic isolation made them cultural outsiders in their own region, a people whose very way of thinking was distinct from the Semitic and Sumerian cultures that surrounded them. It is a powerful testament to their deep-rooted, indigenous identity in the Iranian highlands, a stubborn refusal to be absorbed linguistically even as they engaged in constant cultural exchange. This language barrier, which we still struggle to cross today, likely reinforced their fierce sense of independence and difference, setting the stage for their role as Mesopotamia's eternal rival and counterweight. This spirit of defiance is etched into the historical record through their centuries of relentless resistance. The Elamites were not a people who accepted subjugation lightly. Their relationship with the lowland empires was a complex, millennia-long dance of warfare, temporary conquest, and brilliant reversals. Their most spectacular act of defiance came around 2000 before Common Era, an event that would have sent shockwaves through the ancient world. The mighty Sumerian city of the glorious capital of a renowned dynasty, had grown powerful and overextended. The Elamites saw their opportunity. In a stunning campaign, Elamite armies swept down from their mountain fortresses, marched across the plains, and sacked the magnificent city of itself. This was not a mere raid. It was the total and complete destruction of imperial capital. The laments composed by the Sumerians after this catastrophe survive to this day, poems of unimaginable grief that paint the Elamites as a destructive, barbaric force. But from the Elamite perspective, this was the ultimate power move, a decisive demonstration that the Highlanders could not only resist the empires of the plain, but could bring them to their knees. This victory was a key factor in ending the Sumerian Renaissance and ushered in a new period of Elamite ascendancy, proving that their resilience was matched by a potent offensive capability. Yet, to paint the Elamites solely as destroyers would be a profound misrepresentation. They were also brilliant administrators and cultural synthesists. Their capital, Susa, became a thriving cosmopolitan center where Elamite, Mesopotamian, and local highland traditions fused into a unique and sophisticated culture. They developed complex administrative systems to manage their kingdom, using their version of cuneiform to keep meticulous records of resources, trade, and labor. This bureaucratic genius did not go unnoticed. Centuries later, when the Persian Empire rose to dominate the entire Near East, they chose Susa as one of their administrative capitals. They did not erase the Elamite system, they adopted and built upon it. The Persians utilized Elamite scribes and administrative protocols to help run their vast empire. The Elamite language, intriguingly, remained in official use for centuries within the Persian bureaucracy, a remarkable survival that speaks volumes about its sophistication and effectiveness. The Elamites, in essence, provided the administrative backbone for the First World Empire, their legacy silently embedded in the machinery of Persian rule. For all their resilience and influence, the Elamite civilization did not endure forever. Their final chapter is one of brutal and total annihilation. The great Assyrian Empire, under its most ruthless king, Ashurbanipal, set its sights on Elam in the 7th century before Common Era. The Assyrians were masters of psychological warfare and total conquest, and they viewed the stubborn independence of Elam as an intolerable threat. Ashurbanipal's campaign was not just a war, it was a calculated act of cultural erasure. He boasts in his inscriptions of having completely destroyed Susa, the eternal capital. He tore down its ziggurats, smashed the statues of its gods, and desecrated the royal tombs, even dragging the bones of ancient Elamite kings back to Assyria as trophies. Most symbolically, he claims to have sown the fields of Susa with salt, a final curse to render the land barren and ensure the city could never rise again. This was a trauma from which Elamite culture never recovered. While a faint Elamite identity persisted under Persian rule, their unique language, their political independence, and their distinct cultural spirit were extinguished. They faded into history, not through a slow decline, but in the fire and ash of Assyrian vengeance. A tragic end for one of the ancient world's most resilient and fascinating civilizations. To truly grasp the scale of Minoan influence, we must look beyond their island shores and out to the open sea, where their real power was born. They were the undisputed masters of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, their sturdy, oar-powered ships serving as the vital arteries of an economic and cultural network that stretched from the Nile Delta to the shores of Sardinia. This wasn't a scattered collection of trade routes, it was a meticulously managed maritime empire, a thalassocracy that moved more than just goods. In Egypt, Minoan envoys, depicted in tomb frescoes at Thebes bearing distinctive Cretan gifts, were received at the highest levels of the pharaoh's court. Their ships carried coveted Cretan saffron, fine olive oil, and magnificent pottery to the ports of the Levant, returning with ingots of Cypriot copper, essential for the bronze that gave the age its name. They established trading colonies on islands like Kythera and Rhodes, and their distinctive artifacts have been found as far west as the Iberian Peninsula. This control of the sea lanes allowed them to accumulate immense wealth without the need for the massive defensive walls that characterized their Mycenaean contemporaries. Their security came from their decks and their oars, a floating fortress that made their island home virtually impregnable, and their culture a dominant force across the known world. This maritime prowess is beautifully reflected in the art that adorned their palace walls, frescoes that pulse with a love for the natural world that is utterly unique in antiquity. The most iconic of these is the celebrated dolphin fresco from the Queen's Megaren at Knossos. It doesn't depict a king conquering enemies or a god demanding obedience. Instead, it shows a graceful, playful pod of dolphins swimming through a sea brimming with octopuses and fish. This wasn't mere decoration, it was a celebration of the sea itself, the source of their life and prosperity, rendered with an observational skill and joyful energy that feels timeless. This deep connection to nature is echoed in other works, like the breathtakingly naturalistic Blue Bird fresco from Knossos, capturing the delicate creature mid-movement amid swaying reeds. This artistic philosophy stands in stark contrast to the formalized, hierarchical art of Egypt or Mesopotamia, revealing a society that found divinity and beauty in the living world around them, a perspective that would deeply influence the later naturalism of classical Greek art. Perhaps the most captivating and dangerous expression of their culture was the ritual of bull leaping, immortalized in dynamic frescoes and small figurines. This was far more than a sport or entertainment. It was likely a central, sacred ceremony that combined high-stakes athleticism with profound spiritual meaning. The depiction is always the same: a powerful charging bull, a young male athlete grasping its horns to use the animal's own thrust to propel himself into a somersault, and a second athlete waiting behind to catch the leaper. The incredible danger involved suggests this was an act of extreme devotion, a way for individuals to demonstrate their grace, courage, and perhaps their favor with the divine. The presence of both male and female participants in the artwork is particularly striking, with women depicted not as spectators, but as active, central figures in the ceremony, often shown with pale skin in the conventional Minoan style, catching the leapers or standing authoritatively in the arena. This leads us to one of the most debated and fascinating aspects of Minoan society: the role of women. The overwhelming evidence from art and archaeology suggests that women held a place of exceptional prominence, potentially central to their religious and social life. Frescoes and seal stones repeatedly show women in positions of clear authority. They are depicted as priestesses presiding over rituals, as elegant attendees in lavish court scenes, and as the focal points of worship. The most frequently recurring divine figure in Minoan art is a powerful female deity, often portrayed as a mistress of animals, standing proudly on a mountain peak and flanked by lions or griffins. Snake goddess figurines, found in temple repositories, show a woman holding writhing serpines in each hand, an image of potent, possibly chthonic, power. The absence of any obvious depictions of a dominant, warrior king figure, so common in other contemporary cultures, has led many scholars to argue that Minoan society was likely matrilineal, if not matriarchal, or at the very least, that their religion was intensely female-centered. This spiritual power would have translated into significant social influence, giving women a role that their later Mycenaean and classical Greek descendants would not enjoy. When the dazzling Minoan civilization was finally extinguished by the dual blows of the Thura eruption and Mycenaean invasion, its legacy was far from lost. The conquerors became the inheritors. The Mycenaeans who took control of Knossos adopted the Minoan linear script, adapting it to write their own early Greek language in the script we call Linear B, providing us with the first written records of Greek in history. They absorbed Minoan artistic motifs, architectural principles, and likely vast swaths of their religious mythology. These stories, filtered through centuries of retelling and a more patriarchal, warlike worldview, evolved into the very bedrock of classical Greek myth. The Great Palace of Knossos, with its confusing, multi-storied layout, became the source for the legend of the labyrinth, the impossible maze built by the architect Daedalus for King Minos. The powerful bull-leaping ritual, remembered but perhaps no longer understood, likely gave rise to the myth of the Minotaur, the monstrous half-man, half-bull creature said to dwell at the labyrinth's heart. The Minoans themselves, in their sophistication and their sudden disappearance into the Sea of Time, became the ultimate source for Plato's tale of Atlantis, a magnificent, advanced island civilization that was swallowed by the waves in a single day and night. The Minoans, therefore, were not a dead end but a cultural catalyst, their spirit flowing irresistibly into the bloodstream of the Greeks, who would forever after draw upon this lost world of graceful athletes, powerful goddesses, and dolphins dancing in a wine-dark sea. Beyond the golden crowns and warrior elites, the Scylla kingdom nurtured a profound intellectual tradition, one that looked beyond earthly power to the mysteries of the cosmos itself. High in the hills surrounding their capital, Gyeongju, they constructed an astonishing astronomical observatory known as Cheomseongdi. This elegant, bottle-shaped tower of cut granite blocks is the oldest surviving observatory in all of East Asia, a testament to their sophisticated understanding of the heavens. Its construction wasn't merely symbolic, it was a highly functional scientific instrument. The square window-like opening on its top and the 12 layers of stone below it are believed to have been meticulously aligned with the movement of the sun and stars, allowing Scylla's court astronomers to track the seasons with pinpoint accuracy. This wasn't just an academic exercise, it was essential statecraft. By creating precise calendars, they could predict the optimal times for planting and harvest, organize major religious ceremonies, and reinforce the king's authority by demonstrating his unique connection to the celestial order. Their observations were so detailed that they left records of solar eclipses, comet sightings, and even the appearance of a supernova, events they interpreted as divine messages that guided their decisions and solidified their place in a vast, interconnected universe. This deep spiritual and intellectual curiosity found its most beautiful expression in a revolutionary artistic movement. As devout Buddhists, the Scylla people were eager patrons of religious art, but they were not mere imitators of Chinese or Indian styles. Instead, they embarked on a breathtaking project of cultural synthesis, blending the imported doctrines of Buddhism with their own indigenous Korean sensibilities and shamanistic heritage to create a uniquely Korean Buddhist art. This fusion is magnificently captured in one of their greatest masterpieces, the Seokgyeram Grotto. Carved high on the slopes of Mount Toham, this man-made cave temple is an architectural and sculptural marvel of the 8th century. Inside, a serene and majestic statue of the Buddha sits in meditation beneath a magnificent domed ceiling, surrounded by exquisite bas-relief carvings of bodhisattvas, disciples, and guardian deities. The entire chamber is an engineered microcosm of the Buddhist universe, but the true genius lies in the humanization of the divine. The Scylla artisans sculpted the Buddha's face with a gentle, compassionate smile, and a knowing, almost intimate expression that feels distinctly Korean, a stark departure from the more remote and transcendental Buddhas of earlier traditions. This artistic philosophy extended to their cast bronze temple bells, like the sacred bell of King Seongdeok, which were renowned not only for their immense size and deep, resonant tone that could be heard for miles, but for the intricate narratives cast into their surfaces, scenes of flying angels, and Buddhist iconography that seemed to dance around the surface, telling stories in metal. The ultimate expression of Scylla's wealth, power, and spiritual beliefs, however, was reserved for the journey into the afterlife. The rolling hills around Gyeongju are not natural landscapes. They are in fact a vast necropolis of royal burial mounds known as tumuli. These large, grass-covered earthen hills contain some of the most spectacular archaeological treasures ever discovered in Korea. Excavations of tombs like the Heavenly Horse Tomb and the Gold Crown Tomb have revealed wooden burial chambers packed with an almost unimaginable array of grave goods, placed there to serve the deceased in the next world. And nothing symbolizes the glory of Scylla more than the artifacts found within. The exquisite gold crowns are marvels of metallurgy and symbolism, forged from pure sheet gold and adorned with branching forms that resemble trees or antlers, intricate clusters of jade comma-shaped beads known as gagak, and dangling gold discs that would have shimmered and tinkled with every movement. These were not just displays of extreme wealth, they were sacred objects, likely representing the sacred world tree that connected the earthly king to the heavenly realms, transforming the wearer into a divine being. These tombs also contained finely crafted gold belts, earrings that dangled to the shoulders, elaborate necklaces, swords, and vessels, all demonstrating a technical mastery of metalworking that was unmatched in the region. Together, these achievements in astronomy, art, and funerary practice did more than just define a dynasty. They laid the unshakable foundation for enduring Korean cultural identity. The Silla Kingdom's conscious blending of foreign Buddhist ideas with native Korean artistic principles and spiritual beliefs created a unique synthesis that future generations would point to as the wellspring of their culture. Their precise astronomical records became part of a historical chronology that grounded the Korean people in time, while their artistic innovations set an aesthetic standard that would influence Korean art for 1,000 years. The sheer scale and richness of their tomb constructions served as a powerful, physical reminder of a glorious, unified past. A golden age that later Korean states like Goryeo and Joseon would look back upon with pride and reverence. In weaving together science, faith, and art, the Silla Kingdom gave the Korean peninsula not just a political unity, but a profound and lasting cultural soul. While the sheer scale of their stelae proclaimed their power to the heavens, the Kingdom of Aksum's sophistication truly shone in something far more portable and practical: their currency. They were one of the very few civilizations in all of sub-Saharan Africa to mint their own coins, a bold declaration of economic sovereignty and a powerful tool for international trade. These weren't crude imitations of Roman or Greek models. They were a unique and sophisticated monetary system that evolved with the kingdom itself. Early Aksumite coins, struck in gold, silver, and bronze, proudly bore the image of the reigning monarch, often depicted wearing a radiant crown and sometimes shown holding a bundle of wheat or a spear, symbols of both agricultural prosperity and military might. These portraits were strikingly realistic, capturing the distinct features of individual kings, and the coins were inscribed in Greek, the international language of commerce, ensuring they were recognized and accepted from the markets of Alexandria to the ports of India. This practice was a masterstroke of economic branding, facilitating trade and projecting an image of a stable, wealthy, and legitimate kingdom across the known world. Following their momentous conversion to Christianity, the coinage underwent a profound transformation, becoming a medium for religious proclamation. The disc and crescent symbols of the pre-Christian deity Marum were replaced by the powerful image of the cross. Kings like Ezana and his successors now presented themselves on their coins as Christian rulers, with the cross prominently displayed above their portraits or held in their hands. This was more than just a change in decoration. It was a public, mass-produced statement of a new state identity, a way to communicate their faith to every citizen and trading partner who handled their currency. The coins became tiny, metallic missionaries, circulating the news of the kingdom's conversion far and wide and solidifying Aksum's place within the burgeoning Christian world. This confidence fueled ambitions beyond their highland home, leading to a series of remarkable military campaigns across the Red Sea. The Axumite kings looked toward the Arabian Peninsula, specifically the region of Himyar in modern-day Yemen. In the 6th century, a Jewish king named Dhu Nuwas had come to power in Himyar and initiated a violent persecution of the Christian population there. The Axumites, seeing themselves as defenders of the faith, and perhaps seeking to control the lucrative trade routes on the opposite shore, launched a massive naval invasion. A fleet of ships carried an Axumite army across the Red Sea, where they defeated Dhu Nuwas and established an Axumite viceroy to rule over Himyar for several decades. This extraordinary venture demonstrates the reach of Axumite power, their ability to project military force across a significant body of water, and their willingness to engage in the religious and political conflicts of a wider world. Alongside their economic and military prowess, the Axumites were also making profound intellectual contributions through the development of their language, Ge'ez. Originally a spoken tongue, Ge'ez was adapted into a written script, and with the arrival of Christianity, it became the language of liturgy, literature, and state. Monks and scholars embarked on a monumental project of translation, rendering the Bible and other crucial Christian texts from Greek and Syriac into Ge'ez. But they didn't stop there. They also began to produce a rich body of original Ge'ez literature, including vibrant royal chronicles that documented the deeds of their kings, profound theological works, and the magnificent Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, a sprawling epic that wove together history, legend, and theology to tell the story of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon and their son, Menelik, who supposedly brought the Ark of the Covenant to Axum. This literary flowering created a powerful national mythos that cemented the dynasty's divine right to rule, and gave the kingdom a unique cultural and religious identity. This very identity, however, became a double-edged sword following the rapid rise of Islam in the 7th century. The explosive expansion of the Muslim caliphates across North Africa and the Middle East completely reshaped the geopolitical map. Axum, once a central node in a network of Christian and pagan states, suddenly found itself an isolated island in a rising Islamic sea. Their direct access to the Mediterranean trade network was severed almost overnight. This isolation had a paradoxical effect. On one hand, it acted as a remarkable preservative. Cut off from the theological debates and schisms that rocked the Christian Church in Europe and Byzantium, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintained ancient liturgical practices and interpretations that elsewhere were reformed or abandoned. Axum, and later Ethiopia, became a living museum of early Christian traditions. On the other hand, this isolation came at a devastating economic cost. The Red Sea, once an Axumite lake and a conduit for immense wealth, was now dominated by Muslim traders and powers. The lucrative long-distance trade that had been the lifeblood of the kingdom for centuries dwindled to a trickle. Without this economic engine, the Axumite state began to contract. The resources to maintain grand projects, field large armies, and support a complex urban society gradually vanished. The population likely shifted to a more subsistence-based lifestyle, and the great stelly fields and palaces of the capital were slowly abandoned. The kingdom didn't collapse in fire and conquest. It underwent a long, slow fade, receding from an international powerhouse into a secluded, mountain-bound realm, its glorious past slowly buried by time and earth, waiting centuries for the world to rediscover its story. The economic might of the Indus Valley civilization was not built on conquest or tribute, but on the quiet, relentless pulse of commerce, and their trade networks were the vital arteries that connected this vast territory. Their merchants did not just travel to neighboring villages, they operated on a staggering international scale, creating connections that reached across mountains and seas. Archaeologists have found definitive proof of this global reach in the form of Indus Valley seals and distinctive pottery in the ruins of Mesopotamian cities like Ur and Susa. Cuneiform tablets from these sites even mention trading with a far-off land called Meluha, a name most scholars believe refers to the Indus region itself. Their ships, sturdy vessels built from teak wood, would have braved the Arabian Sea, carrying cargoes of coveted luxury goods to the ports of the Persian Gulf. In return for their exquisite carnelian beads, vividly dyed cotton cloth, and exotic tropical woods, they brought back Mesopotamian copper, silver, and gold, along with precious lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan. This wasn't just simple barter. It was a sophisticated, long-distance exchange system that required immense organization, trust, and knowledge of foreign markets, placing the Indus Valley people at the heart of a Bronze Age global economy. Facilitating this complex trade required more than just brave sailors. It demanded an unprecedented level of technological standardization to ensure fairness and trust between partners who might never meet face to face. This is where the Indus Valley genius becomes truly apparent. Across the entire civilization, from the largest city to the smallest town, they used a uniform system of weights. These were meticulously crafted from chert, a hard stone that could be precisely shaped and polished. The system was brilliantly binary. The smallest unit was a tiny weight. From there, they doubled 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64 units, and then moved into decimal multiples for the heaviest weights. Imagine a merchant in Mohenjo-Daro preparing a shipment of grain. He could measure it out using his local weights, and when it arrived in the distant city of Harappa, the merchant there could use his own identical set to verify the amount instantly, with no argument. This universal standard eliminated fraud and simplified transactions, acting as a powerful lubricant for commerce and a testament to a central authority, or a deeply ingrained cultural consensus, that could enforce such precise norms over an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Their technological prowess extended far beyond weights and measures into the very heart of industry, metallurgy. The Indus Valley people were master smiths, advanced practitioners of a science that was still in its infancy across much of the world. They didn't just use copper. They alloyed it with tin and arsenic to create a superior, harder bronze that was cast into sharp razors, efficient chisels, and lethal spearheads. They worked with gold and silver to create delicate jewelry and ritual objects, but perhaps most impressively, they were pioneers in working with lead, a difficult and toxic metal. Archaeologists have found Indus Valley artifacts made from lead, including a curious vessel that may have been used for lining or repairing other objects. This willingness to experiment with different materials shows a deep understanding of material properties and a drive for technological innovation. Their tools were not crude. They were the finest available, and this technical excellence would have increased agricultural productivity, improved construction, and given their artisans an edge in crafting goods that were highly desirable both at home and abroad. This seamless integration of far-flung trade, standardized systems, and advanced technology paints a picture of a civilization at the peak of its efficiency and prosperity, which is what makes their ultimate fate so deeply perplexing and haunting. There is no evidence of a singular, catastrophic invasion. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa show no layers of ash from a massive conflagration, no streets littered with the bodies of a slaughtered populace. Instead, the archaeological record reveals a slow, grinding decline, a civilization that simply forgot how to be a civilization. The meticulous urban standards that defined them for centuries begin to decay. People start building shoddy, poorly constructed homes directly on top of the grand, wide main streets, completely disregarding the sacred grid pattern that had organized life for a millennium. The magnificent, covered drainage systems, their pride and a key to public health, fall into disrepair and are abandoned, allowing waste to accumulate in the streets. The long-distance trade networks that brought lapis lazuli from the mountains and copper from the west seem to sputter and halt, severing their economic lifeline to the outside world. The most compelling explanation for this quiet unraveling points not to a human enemy, but to an environmental one. Geological evidence suggests the very rivers that gave them life underwent a dramatic transformation. The mighty Gagar-Hakor River, which many scholars believe is the ancient Sarasvati River of legend, was a major artery running through the heart of their territory. Climate data and satellite imagery now reveal that this river began to shift its course and slowly dry up, transforming from a perennial, life-giving flow into a seasonal trickle, and then into a barren ghost riverbed. This desiccation was likely caused by a larger shift in monsoon patterns, which became less reliable and brought prolonged droughts. The intricate irrigation canals that fed their fields ran dry. The agricultural surplus that supported their dense urban populations, their specialized artisans, and their merchant class simply vanished. Faced with this creeping environmental crisis, the response was not a revolt, but a somber, pragmatic migration. Families and communities gradually abandoned the grand cities, dispersing east toward the more reliable waters of the Ganges River system and south into the Indian Peninsula. They took their language, their beliefs, and their skills with them, but the complex, centralized, urban idea that was the Indus Valley civilization could not be reassembled. It was a magnificent experiment in organized living that was ultimately undone by the changing climate it depended on, leaving behind not ruins of a battle, but the silent, empty streets of a forgotten dream. As we've journeyed through these 30 lost worlds, from the sunken cities of the Minoans to the buried temples of the Indus Valley, a haunting pattern begins to emerge across the millennia. These civilizations didn't vanish randomly or in isolation. They fell victim to a recurring set of vulnerabilities that echo with surprising relevance today. By examining these common threads, we move beyond mere historical curiosity and begin to see a mirror held up to our own modern global society. One of the most persistent themes is the delicate relationship between a civilization and its environment. The Machu of Peru, with their incredible hydraulic engineering, watched their canal systems turn to dust when El Niño patterns shifted, bringing catastrophic floods followed by relentless drought. The Garamontes of the Sahara literally drank their civilization into oblivion, tapping an ancient fossil water aquifer that could never be replenished. Even the mighty Maya, though not covered in our list, faced similar pressures as their population growth likely contributed to deforestation and soil exhaustion. These stories reveal a fundamental truth. No matter how sophisticated our technology becomes, we remain utterly dependent on stable environmental systems. The climate changes that destabilized these ancient societies were often regional and slow-moving compared to the global, rapid shifts we're experiencing today, making their experiences both a warning and a case study in adaptation failure. Equally crucial was the role of economic interconnection and resource management. The Dilmun civilization flourished as the indispensable middlemen of Bronze Age trade, only to collapse when new maritime routes bypassed their carefully controlled networks. The Elamites found themselves isolated and economically strangled when the rise of Islam redrew the world's trade maps, severing their connections to traditional partners. These examples demonstrate that economic specialization, while creating incredible wealth, can also create profound vulnerability. When a society's prosperity depends on a single resource, like the Nox iron or the Olmecs' control of ritual goods, or on its position in a specific trade network, any disruption to that system can trigger a catastrophic domino effect. In our globally connected world, where supply chains stretch across continents and financial systems are deeply intertwined, this ancient lesson about diversification and resilience feels particularly urgent. Social and political structures also proved to be both a source of strength and a point of failure. The Silla Kingdom's rigid bone rank system provided centuries of stability by clearly defining everyone's place in society, but it eventually stifled innovation and bred such resentment that it contributed to the kingdom's fragmentation. The Indus Valley civilization presents the opposite fascinating case, their apparent lack of a centralized, king-like ruler, and their focus on public works over palaces might suggest a more collective form of governance that worked brilliantly for centuries until environmental pressures became too great. In both models, we see that a society's ability to respond to crisis is deeply tied to its political flexibility and the legitimacy of its institutions. When those in power lose the trust of the population, whether through perceived failure to address problems or through oppressive rigidity, the social contract can dissolve rapidly, making coordinated response to challenges impossible. Perhaps the most complex factor lies in the realm of cultural identity and adaptability. The Etruscans were gradually absorbed by the expanding Roman Republic, their unique language and customs slowly fading as Roman citizenship offered new opportunities. This type of cultural assimilation represents a different kind of collapse, not a dramatic fall, but a quiet fading. In contrast, the Minoans experienced a sudden catastrophic blow from the Thura eruption from which they could not recover, making them vulnerable to conquest. These examples show that resilience isn't just about military strength or wealth. It's about the cultural flexibility to incorporate new ideas, the demographic strength to recover from disaster, and the shared identity that binds people together through difficult transitions. Societies that become too rigid in their traditions or too dependent on a specific way of life often struggle to adapt when circumstances change. What makes these ancient collapses so relevant is that they rarely resulted from a single cause. Instead, we see intricate webs of interconnection where one weakness exacerbates another. A prolonged drought might lead to crop failure, which strains the economic system, which undermines faith in political leaders, which weakens social cohesion, making the civilization vulnerable to invasion or internal fracture. This cascading failure pattern suggests that the true measure of a civilization's resilience lies not in avoiding problems altogether, but in maintaining enough buffers and flexibility across multiple systems, environmental, economic, political, social, to absorb shocks and adapt to new realities. Studying these lost civilizations ultimately provides us with something incredibly valuable: long-term data on societal sustainability. Their ruins are not just romantic relics. They are archives of human experience with thousands of years of experimentation in how to build and maintain complex societies. By understanding why they failed, we gain insights into the potential vulnerabilities in our own world, the pressures on our environment, the fragility of our economic networks, the tensions in our social structures. Their stories don't offer simple solutions or direct parallels, but they provide perspective, reminding us that civilizations are not permanent structures, but dynamic experiments in human organization that require constant attention, adaptation, and respect for the fundamental systems that support them. From the sun-drenched pyramids of the Minoans to the figuras of the Garamantes, from the colossal stone heads of the Olmecs to the astronomical observatory of Silla, our journey through these 30 forgotten worlds reveals an astonishing tapestry of human ingenuity. We've encountered master engineers who turned deserts green, visionary artists who captured the human soul in terracotta, and daring traders who connected continents. These were not minor footnotes in history. They were vibrant, complex societies that thrived for centuries, each making its own unique contribution to the grand, unfolding story of humanity. Their stories stand as a powerful testament to the incredible diversity of the human experience, proving that civilization is not a single, linear path, but a multitude of experiments in how to live, build, and believe. Yet, the very fact that these cultures so advanced, so resilient, so brilliant could vanish so completely from our collective memory is a profound and humbling realization. It reminds us that the history we learn is but a fragment of what was, a story written by the survivors and shaped by the accidents of what evidence endured. For every Egypt and Rome that made it into the textbooks, there are dozens of Norte Chicos and Nox, their whispers waiting just beneath the surface for us to rediscover. Their disappearances, whether from climate change, economic shift, or social unraveling, whisper a crucial lesson about the fragility of even the greatest societies. They show us that no civilization, no matter how powerful or perfectly adapted, is immune to the tides of change, the pressures of its environment, or the consequences of its own success. This reflection inevitably turns our gaze forward. If empires that built for eternity could be swallowed by jungle, sand, and sea, what legacy will our own global civilization leave behind? Will future archaeologists sift through the remnants of our cities and marvel at our ingenuity? Or will they puzzle over the choices that led to our decline? The stories of these lost cultures are not just about the past. They are a mirror held up to our present, challenging us to consider the sustainability of our systems, the resilience of our institutions, and the values we choose to etch into the world, whether in stone, metal, or digital code. They urge us to think beyond the short term and consider what markers of our existence will truly endure. We've only scratched the surface of history's deepest mysteries, and the Earth surely holds countless more stories waiting to be told. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which of these lost civilizations captured your imagination the most? Was it the maritime empire of the Minoans, the enigmatic Indus Valley with their unparalleled city planning, or the powerful kingdom of Kush that ruled Egypt as pharaohs? Share your thoughts and let us know which one you'd most want to learn more about in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten corners of our past, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the world's greatest historical mysteries. The past is full of secrets,